We do.
I don't know why I was having trouble getting in.
It
I
seems
was
like
too.
it seems like a bunch of you are. Yeah, Seth,
Yeah.
Bobby, Michael, all of you seem to have had issues in today. So we'll have to
And
fix-
that's sort of a day.
yeah.
Hello, all.
Hey there, guys.
I
Great. We're all here. We're all ready to go.
We have a quorum.
I know that I think Alberto is not going to be here tonight, and I think Isabel is going to be late. So when she comes in, she can, I guess, vote for him. Do we have?
What about David?
otherwise? Waiting for David.
David. And that is all.
Nobody in the attendees list from here, because I got bumped into that list somehow today.
Yeah, it said I had to be entered as allowed in as a panelist.
And I accidentally said no, thank you. Oops. A little confused. Okay. Well, we have a quorum and a big agenda, so I think we should probably get started. So I guess we kind of just took attendance. I guess, Amanda, can you do an official attendance for us just real quick?
Sure. Seth Roy,
Here.
Michael Aronson,
Here,
Nina Aaron,
here.
Bobby Bowker,
Here.
David Chow is not here. Alberto Fernandez is not here. Eric Talbot
Here.
and Isabel Mugen is not here, but she hopefully will be. We have Jaime Martinez, Planning Director. We have Jamie Kane, Planning Department Secretary. We have Joe Tremelli for Kellard Sessions, Amanda Brosi, Land Use Council, and Stuart Kahan, Village Corporation Council.
Good.
Did I
All
miss-
right. I think everybody here was named, at least it's in front of my screen.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. So we're gonna get right into this tonight. I guess we can start off with the first agenda item, which is 81-89 South Highland, Birch Brook. So if Jaime, you could just, sorry, Amanda, were you about to?
I just wanted to quickly, I think, just let everybody who's on the meeting know about those couple of new policies that we're going to be enforcing going forward before we jump
Got it.
into Birch Brook.
Please, yeah, let's go for that.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you. So going forward, this is for everybody who's, just observing, and this is just a notification that going forward, the planning department will be enforcing the following policy. Applicants who do not submit requested revisions or additional information to the planning department by the revision deadline as stated in the posted schedule on the website will be administratively adjourned to the next board meeting. This applies to the planning board, the BAR, and the ZBA, just FYI. This language that I just read will be posted on the village website, revised application materials for all three of those boards, and the 2022 meeting schedule. The rationale for this policy is that board members, staff, and the public must have adequate time to review those materials in advance of meetings. This policy is also necessary in order to comply with a recent amendment to the open meetings law, which provides that all agency records that are scheduled for a discussion at a public meeting need to be made available at least 24 hours in advance of the meeting to the extent practicable. So it will no longer suffice for applicants to provide documents last minute to the board in an attempt to have them discussed, after the submission deadline is passed. In order to ensure that your matter is heard by the board and that documents can be posted in a timely fashion for everyone to review, you are going to be expected to adhere to the posted submission deadlines. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So with that, we can now we'll push back to where we were a moment ago, introducing 81-89. So we're starting off with returning applications. And if Jaime, if you could just kind of give us an overview of where we stand with this.
Yeah, so we have today, we have the applicant here. Alex Glad is representing Dan Patrick for the applicant. The applicant, since the last meeting, went to the EAC. EAC provided some preliminary comments, but expressed an interest in going to actually visit the site. So we're currently working on trying to give them coordinate between Keldridge Sessions and the members of the EAC to go visit the site in review of the wetlands permit comments. So the applicant has indicated that they are aware that the EAC would like it, but we do need the applicant to consent officially, I believe. And so other than that, we don't have any new submissions from them. So there's nothing new to discuss as they haven't, finalized any plans or submitted any plans in response to the preliminary comments that they got from the EAC. So with that, I'm going to bring on the applicant and give them an opportunity to talk. And we have Alec Glad.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, so I think that covers it pretty well, but just for the board's benefit, we haven't submitted anything since because we still are working through with the EAC. So we didn't want to give you multiple iterations of a plan or submit anything in piecemeal. So hopefully we're appearing before the EAC next week. So hopefully by then they will have their comments for you. So then we can move forward at next month's planning board meeting.
Okay, so then can we hear from you at this point now that you're amenable to the EAC taking additional time for their review?
So we're amenable up to next week's EAC meeting to the 4th. And if additional time is needed after that, our position is we can cross that bridge when we get there. But at this moment in time, we don't want to extend it farther than that.
I'll be honest, I don't think that it's totally reasonable to expect that the EAC would meet next week and have a letter prepared on the same day. So you're going to have to provide them at least a couple extra days to write a letter post-meeting.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, and our intent isn't to hold them just to the 4th, but what we're trying to say is we don't want this just to go on into perpetuity. They're a referral board, and we hope that they do get you their comments timely.
Okay. Do we need to have a time frame and extent kind of in place during this meeting, or can we work with prior to our next meeting? We also need time to review the EAC's comments before we.
I would say that consistent with the revision deadline would probably be a fair amount of time, or maybe a few days before the revision deadline, a week before the revision deadline, to provide the applicant time to respond to those comments. So, Jamie, what do you know what the revision deadline is off the top of your head by any chance?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, so I'd say like a week from next week's meeting, so the following Monday.
Mr.
Probably.
Glad, would it be unreasonable to ask for enough time for the EAC to complete their discussion at this month's meeting and then to have a letter prepared for their following meeting for them to consider? So I don't want to unduly rush the EAC, but they might want to then consider something in writing when they're all together next.
Are you saying, so my understanding is the EAC meets once a month, correct? So they meet next week, which is the first week of November, and then they won't meet the first week again until December?
Right, they do meet once a month. They have to prepare a report of their recommendations. And they might want to meet again to consider that actual written report before, sending it back to the planning board. Is that unreasonable?
Yeah, I think at this time, because I am working with this on Dan Patrick too, I can't agree to that now, but I will bring that back to him. I mean, I know our hope is that after the November meeting, a report would be issued so that we can move forward with the planning board in November and not have to get pushed with the AAC to December.
The revision deadline is November 8th.
Amanda, just so you know, the usual practice with the EAC has been that they will review it. The chair generally then prepares a draft of a letter, which he circulates to the members to essentially see what they think. The members get back, and then we generally have a letter prepared actually in advance of the next EAC meeting. So it is not inconceivable that the EAC, and just Mr. Glad, just note that next week's meeting is Wednesday. I know the EAC usually, I think, meets on Tuesdays, but it's election day, so it will be next Wednesday.
Thursday.
I'm sorry?
Thursday.
Next Thursday, even better, since I can't be there on Wednesday. I have to deal with don't let anyone hear me say this, the Gang of Five on Wednesday night. So we will deal with them. But so that will be Thursday night. So that actually will, my guess is that probably sometime within a week to 10 days after that meeting, the EAC will have something, but I do want to give them the opportunity. We did not have a full board at the last EAC meeting, particularly a couple of members who have specific interest relating to stormwater and wetlands, who will hopefully be at this meeting. So, I think that there will be something that will be produced so that the planning board should be able to consider this in November. But I know that the EAC has a number of issues they wanted to discuss. So I think it's fair, as Ms. Brosi said, to give them the time to basically do that. And they've been working through it. They'll get back to it on Thursday night, and it'll go from there. And thank you, Jamie, for making it clear to me that it's Thursday, not Wednesday.
Okay, so at this point, I mean, we have the applicant acknowledging or agreeing to giving the EAC additional time. It'd be helpful to have a date or a deadline that we all agree to, because we're not going to meet again until the end of November. So we're not going to have an opportunity to discuss this or grant any further extensions. If there's a chance of seeing this again in November, I think it would be helpful to have a date. And I don't know if the November 8th is the revision date for the planning board.
Yeah, the November 8th is the revision deadline. I think it'd probably be helpful to give them the opportunity to come back on the revision deadline. I do expect that the applicant is going to need to make changes to their plans to accommodate whatever the EAC comments are. So the applicant also needs a little bit of time to be able to respond to those comments and provide them in a manner that's timely in order to get them on the board as well. They have zoning extensions that are running out and other matters that they need to deal with. So they're under a clock as well. So.
Right. I mean, that November 8th is only 2.5 weeks from now.
I think it's, I think that we can go back to the EAC and see if they need longer than that. If they do, we could ask them at that time. We can always go back to the applicant and ask for them to consent for a couple more days.
Okay. So then at this point, we'd be looking at, give them 2 days before the revision deadline.
Yeah, I imagine they're, if we are able to have a meeting this Thursday on site, they should have the bulk of their comments at that point, and they should be able to talk about them at the meeting coming up next week, and then they should be able to put something together. So I do agree with Stuart. I think they'll be able to get it done. It might be a little rushed at the end, but I think they'll be fine. They've already accumulated some comments, so if they need more time, we'll just communicate that back to the developer, make sure that we have their consent.
Does that work for you, Mr. Glad?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all we have to discuss on that one tonight. So thank you.
The planning board also consents, I'm assuming, right?
The plan, yes. Should we do a vote, or
Are
are there any objections on the planning board to this consent?
No objections.
right, there are no objections noted, so the planning board provides their consent.
Okay, great.
And I just want to note, there's still the public hearing was adjourned to this meeting, so I don't know if you need to open and adjourn it then to November.
So the public hearing was adjourned. We have no further, we have no new materials to review or to discuss. So the public hearing would then be adjourned until November's meeting. Do we need to have a motion, or does that need to be an official motion, Amanda, or can that just be?
No, we can do that administratively. Just
All right. Okay. It was an adjournment. It'll remain in adjournment until November.
yeah.
All right. Thank you. I think that covers that item. So thank you, Mr. Glad. And I think we can move on to our next item on our agenda.
Thank you for your time.
Yep. So next we have 14 Water Street returning to us. So Jaime, if you can just give us an update.
Yeah, so for the general public, the planning board met and had a pretty broad discussion about the environmental review process, and seeker worked on the part 2. There were a lot of open questions, and so that long form part 2 was circulated to the board. The board also got the workbook circulated to them so they could have a better understanding of the question. So the big thing for us today, I think, is to talk a little bit about those questions. The applicant did provide some responses to items that were talked about during the work session. So, they unfortunately came in today. So they answer some questions. They do add some details. You're not going to be taking a vote on that matter today, I don't presume. So you can look at those items if you would like and have a discussion about them, but they have not been posted to the web yet. So the public still needs to get an opportunity to talk about them and comment back on them. And they have, again, since they haven't been provided, you would want to make sure that they remain open as a topic of discussion and public hearing for the next month. With that in mind, I mean, that's pretty much where we are right now. The big question in front of us is dealing with the questions of environmental review, and the applicant is here to answer any questions that you may have.
Should we?
I'm going to recuse myself from this meeting too, okay?
Thank you, Bobby.
100%.
Okay. So I guess before we bring the applicant in, which we will in a moment, we had a couple of focus questions. I don't know, specifically regarding the questions regarding blasting. There's a major question regarding the trees on the site, and I know that there was a subsequent report by the arborist. Should we?
So we got responses on the blasting. We got some responses on the tree. I don't know if it has the full details of what we're looking for, but we did get some responses there. We have a letter from the arborist. I'm not sure, Jamie, did the letter make it to the agenda? It did. My agenda is like not updating for some reason on my computer. So, okay, great. There it is. All right. So do you want to bring the applicant in now, or would you like to take a look at the arborist's letter?
Let's start with the arborist letter real quick, and then we can bring the applicant in, because I think that might answer or kind of spurring some questions.
Yeah. All right. So the arborist, I did reach out to the arborist today. Unfortunately, I didn't hear back from him in time. I reached out a little bit late. He wrote this letter here, so it's a pretty brief letter, but I'm going to read it into the record. It says, on 10/21, I visited the site, reviewed the site plan, and confirmed the trees to be taken down. On 10/15, I was emailed and asked to recommend trees to be planted along another street near the train station. I have not seen this location. On 10/22, I met with Jaime Martinez, reviewed the site plan, and discussed the trees to be taken down. I rechecked the diameter of the trees to be taken down and came up with some different numbers. Magnolia with the co-dominant trunk has 12-inch and 11-inch DBH. Another Norway maple with 17-inch DBH, a Norway maple with 13-inch DBH, a box elder with 23 inches DBH, and a total DBH in diameter in aggregate of 76 inches. The replacement trees of a 3-inch caliber can usually be planted, easily planted after the holes are dug by a crew without a machine. Larger caliber machines usually need a machine to lift and position the root ball as it is rather heavy. This is just, information for consideration if the planning board's coming up with a rationale for how they would like to see those trees replaced. The future planting locations will dictate the size and species selection. So depending on where the trees go, whether that's in a parking lot or a street tree or a park, and the kind of constraints that you have from those locations should dictate the kinds of trees that would go in. So that's something that can be dealt with down the road as selection locations are decided. It said, he also wrote that at the site, possible patio construction at the rear of the lot would probably compromise the root system of the leaning 27-inch DBH Norway maple in the east corner that's owned by the property on Seeger Road. It would be advantageous to both properties to remove the tree at the time of site work. At some point after the patio location is established, several, maybe 3 medium-sized tree species could be planted in order to add something to the site itself. And he said, if any questions, you can reach out to him. So.
Great, thanks, Jaime. All right, and then just to be clear, we don't have any new information from Colored Sessions on this one, right? That there's no
Yeah,
updated
just
review.
before we leave, I do have a question for the arborist. I'm wondering if he could add something about the condition of the trees. I have no idea if these are sound, healthy trees or
He did not,
compromised.
he didn't add anything to his memo about them, but when we walked the site, I walked it with him. He didn't make any comments. He said that they're all healthy trees. He mentioned that the one tree that looks like it might be of concern was the one on the neighboring yard. But he wasn't sure about the condition of it. But he didn't mention that any of the trees looked like they were, at risk of dying. He mentioned that the tree right up at the front was pretty healthy looking, not that old. So we can ask him to go back and comment on that if that's something that's of concern. But the plan as proposed would require them to come down. So if you think it's a relevant point, I can ask him to provide comments. So.
Jaime, the other thing I think we talked about last week at the work session is I'm not sure whose responsibility this is to perhaps reach out to DPW commissioner to find out where potential sites might be for replacement trees, because it seems like the arborist letter is basically indicating that he can't address potential locations and he can't address potential types of trees that could go someplace until he knows where
I asked him that in the field, and so the comment from him in the field was essentially that it's not really up to him where they can go. He said, that's a decision that the village has to make about where they want to put them. So if the village says we want them in a park, then they would, be trees. If they were spaced out where they can grow, tall and wide, then it makes sense to have a tree of a certain size. If it's a street tree or a tree that might go in a parking lot where it doesn't really have a lot of room to grow, then it would be a totally different species. It's not going to grow that tall. So he couldn't give any specifics on the types of trees that should go because that's more location specific.
Right.
And he really couldn't give any specifics on the locations of where they should go because he's a consultant arborist. He doesn't work for the village. He sort of works, when called in to provide feedback. And generally that's, when somebody wants to tear down a tree, he has to go and check out, see, whether it's
right.
what kind of tree it is, check the DBH, things of that nature. So
is that information though, in terms of location, is that something that the board would have before we complete the EAF or make a decision on this project? Or do people not think that's necessary? Is it a condition that we would put into the neg deck or?
I think a replacement strategy is something that the board should determine. I don't know that, I don't think that you need to know exactly where those trees are going to go to make information on the environmental. I don't think that level of detail is important. I think that you can, make statements that basically you need to come up with a tree replacement plan that'll be approved by, come back to the planning board on a tree replacement plan to be approved down the road, prior to CO or prior to, a different stage in the process. But because that's a decision that has to be made, I think in concert with a secondary party, either private property that's going to plant trees or most likely the village who's going to choose the location of those trees, then that decision needs to be made in concert with the village. So you can say
Jaime, we could probably facilitate between DPW and the arborist a conversation so that DPW can advise what positions, what locations might be most appropriate for tree plantings. And then the arborist can say, based on those locations, here's what I would advise planting. And, you know, we could get that happening sooner rather than later so that, you know, the arborist isn't just out here saying, well, I don't really know because it's up to the village. We could probably say, you know, it's okay to talk to DPW about this so that we have a more concrete idea of what will be planted.
All right, I can do that. I can reach out to DPW and ask for a list of, if they have an available list of locations where to put these.
Would it
Amanda,
be DPW and the rec?
Yeah, I was going to say that recreation is also, because it may well be a parks issue more than even DPW. So all three of those I think the two departments with the arborist, I think would be the best grouping.
That makes sense.
Okay.
And I think I would like to see something about the condition of the trees, because that will play into our decision about replacement. I mean, if you've got a tree on there that's 3/4 dead, we're probably not going to worry about replacement. But if they're all healthy, then, you know, then we will be.
I think that's reasonable.
Yep,
Okay.
agreed. Okay. Can we, I think it would be helpful to bring the applicant in right now, because I know they do have some new materials other than what we're just discussing, and give them an opportunity to present briefly, you know, what they've brought in since our last meeting.
Yep, all right. So I have Ron Steinberzel, and then I have Eric Churchill.
Hello, everyone.
So,
Hey there. All right.
I'll let Ron kick us off here. There he is.
All right, and if you guys can kind of focus on, I know that you were asked some questions and you were in the audience during our meeting last week. So if you can kind of focus on kind of responses to kind of the items that came up there, and any new materials that you've brought, you know, that were submitted since our last go around.
Sure, and thank you. If I may, I'd like to just start by addressing a couple of tree issues, some information, and a couple of really salient points that the board just discussed. First, let me say, I actually, after having received a copy of the arborist letter, which was very helpful, I went out to the property today and took a look. And Ms. Aaron, you hit on a big point on condition of the trees. But let me just say this: whatever we agree on is the appropriate caliper diameter that we are responsible for replacing, we will replace. In my experience, maples are the most sought after. They seem to do the best in our region for replanting, but we can absolutely talk about other species. We'll come up with a number. You guys pick where the DPW wants to put them, and we'll buy them, right? I mean, that we'll do the replacement. We are completely prepared to do that. And 3 inch is pretty 3-inch replacement trees are pretty standard. That all seems very reasonable. So I was out at the property today because I was kind of surprised. Joe Link did our survey. Joe obviously has a lot of experience. He's not an arborist, but he did do caliper measurements, and the numbers from the village arborist were significantly, and all of them were different and significantly different. Certainly not just 2 years of growth on a maple tree different. So I just went out to take a look, and I'm not an arborist, of course, but I'm looking at it, and before I even took out a tape measure, I will say that double tree on the front of the property, that's a healthy tree. The at least one of the 2 trees in the most southern corner of the property looks to be very healthy. The tree on the, I guess the northeastern property boundary, that's about 3/4 of the way back off the street. That tree had for some time been suffering. I was there today. It is lying almost on the ground, uphill, typically of downward slope migration. So trees follow the downhill slope as they grow. This is leaning uphill, and it is literally right now resting on an old rusted metal frame of a swing set that, there's over the years, one of the 3 property owners, there's a sofa, a mattress, there's a swing set, and the trunk of the tree is literally held up by the swing.
I apologize. I really do have to jump in here real quick. I greatly apologize, Ron. Are you an arborist?
I'm not an arborist. I am an environmental scientist.
I just want to clarify.
I am an environmental scientist. I have a BS in environmental studies and mathematics from Union College. I have a certificate in environmental law from Pace University.
I want to clarify.
I'm just saying it's literally
public. I apologize, Ron. Just to clarify to the board and the listening public that as an applicant, you do have the right to hire an arborist, but it's really important to understand that you're speaking as a lawyer and not as an arborist about trees.
Well, yeah, I get it. I'm just trying to explain, and I made it clear I'm not an arborist before I commented. It's literally held up by a swing set right now. It's not a healthy tree. We today, because of what we saw, we hired an arborist, John Galtieri from Hudson Landscape and Contractors, Ossining born and raised guy. He's going to come out to the property tomorrow and take a look at that tree, one of the other trees on the southern corner, and that property line tree. And that was the last thing I wanted to mention, was that property line tree. It looks stressed. He's going to take a look at that one as well. I will tell you that we have attempted on a number of occasions to negotiate access to this property behind us. At first, we thought it would be a lot easier for the village and for us if we did our construction staging on that property. We attempted to negotiate access, offered to rent that property, offered to actually at one point demo that building for them at our cost so we could stage there, and the owners just didn't want to even really talk to us. I will say that negotiating access for purposes of removing a property line tree is going to be a very big challenge for us. I've reached out for the property owners council again. I'm going to make every effort to do so, but that tree becomes an issue for us.
Okay, we'll have to, we can discuss that with the arborist, but that's, and you'll give your arborist's review and we'll look at that.
And we're happy. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to say we're happy to replace the caliper width on it, but getting access to take down somebody else's tree is a bigger issue.
Right, we're not going to grant permission to take down a tree on someone else's property without their permission. So let's keep. I mean, I know there were a lot of other comments that came up during our meeting yesterday, and I want to kind of keep this as focused as we can. I know one of the questions that was asked, and we'll kind of ask some specific questions now. I'll move after that into our public hearing, and then we may have some summary comments after that. But as far as the excavation and the work that you're going to be doing on the land, is there any blasting or how is that excavation going to be handled? Was a question that came up in our meeting on last week.
Sure. So we, as part of the revision from the larger project to the smaller project, we have designed the project to have a step in the foundation to minimize the amount of excavation that is required. And so we are not intending to blast, and we are not intending to do much at all rock removal based on the initial geotechnical samples that were taken. In fact, we have specifically designed around minimizing the scope of work.
Joe, is that something that you would see in your review as far as the rock removal? Is there anything that you saw that was, or is that consistent with what you've seen so far on this?
Yeah, just looking at the phase 2, for instance, they do note the soil borings with depths of the rock ranging anywhere from, I think it was 6 feet to maybe 11 feet below grade. Is that correct?
Yes, they took 2 samples, one at about a third of the way from the rear and one about a third of the way from the front. We don't know the intermediate slope of those. But we have, if you I can pull up the section, but you will see a step in the foundation and between the basement floor and the first floor, and that is specifically designed to reduce the amount of rock excavation that is required. And we believe that where it is currently set, again, without knowing the exact fall line of that rock, we believe that it is very minimal. And if we do hit some, it can be based on the geotechnical analysis, it can be ripped and pulled. It does not require blasting.
And it looks like Jaime's bringing up his screen, so we can look at that real quickly.
This is where the borings were done here. See, the soil borings are these crosshatch ones like this. There was soil vapor probes done where the little triangle and the circle is. And groundwater monitoring as well.
Eric, in addition to the borings done as part of the phase 2, have you done a geotech study for the purposes of a foundation design? Or is it limited to these 4 borings?
So there was 2 borings. There are 2 borings that were taken as geotechnical samples, and there were, I believe there are 4 borings, correct me if I'm wrong, Jaime, Mr. Martinez, but I believe there were 4 borings that were taken as soil that were part of the phase 2. The geotechnical report was done as part of the phase 1. When it was noted that we needed to do a phase 2, that's when the additional soil samples were taken. And I believe if you're looking at the phase 2 report, you may only see the soil boring done for the phase 2.
Yeah, I'm opening the phase 1 right now.
So then based on the rock cores that they took, they determined that if encountered, you'd be able to remove that rock by mechanical means as opposed to having to blast.
Yes, sir.
Can you describe what that mechanical means is for the general public? Like, how does that work?
Sure, and I just really want to reiterate that it's in our own best interest to not have to remove this, and hence why we have designed this. It is expensive to remove rock, and so we have designed a foundation that, should we encounter rock much earlier than we anticipate, from an economic point of view, we may even have to adjust that foundation line because we're on a very tight budget here, and so the mechanical means to do that is an excavating machine that has a ripping, essentially a jackhammer-like device that pulls, that goes in and rips the rock apart. And that's why they refer to this as rippable rock, and because it can be ripped out with an excavator. I am not a contractor. I am an architect, but that's my best description of it. And
can you give a estimate of sort of like how loud that machine is and how long that part of the work would take for this site?
I cannot give you a description of how loud it is. I can give you, we're hoping that should that be required, again, should it be required, that type of work is less than a week. In the original plan, the amount of rock that would have been removed would have been over a week. And
let me just say, if I may, Eric is not an engineer or a sound expert. We will certainly comply with all noise or all applicable noise ordinances during the construction.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think the reason I'm asking that question is because later they're going to have to start talking about the environmental impact questions. And I just want them to be aware of that question and give you an opportunity to speak on the record about how long it's going to take, and acknowledging that it is going to be loud if it's needed, that it would be loud. So that
understood, but it's important to also understand that when it comes to the, you know what, Jaime, I'm sorry, I don't want to slow us down. We'll address it in the environmental issues. Thank you.
Great. I think, you know, do we have any other questions on the excavation and the rock removal? I'd like to, I know that I'm just kind of going through my list right here in terms of things that we talked about the other day. Lighting was another issue, and I think I saw on the agenda that there was a lighting diagram that was provided as well. So
Right.
Eric,
I have that here.
if we pull that up.
Mhm.
And if you want to, you know, Eric, if you want to give just a kind of an outline, I know one of our concerns, and this has been a concern that's expressed by the public in this meeting before, is just, you know, how this place will be lit and how that will impact adjacent properties.
Sure. So there is, you know, when you design exterior lighting, you want to think about the uses of the space and also public safety. So we have a light over each door on the street. And I should say, before I go to where the lights are, all lights, you can see the image at the bottom, are motion censored. All lights are daylight censored. And all lights are oriented down to avoid unwanted lighting. And they have glare protection on them. The location of those lights is, and this is the photometric, the lighting plan, is one above the commercial entry, one above the residential entry, two along the walkway to provide access to trash removal. And again, these are only motion censored. So on a typical night where no one is removing trash, there are no lights on. And when on a typical night when no one is walking by there for any reason, there's not a light on there. At the rear on the commercial deck, there are two lights, and these are facing back to that neighbor's property. And again, if no one's out there, there's no lights on.
Eric, quick question on the lighting for the board's, I guess, understanding. The two lights on the north side of the building where the trash refuse, the collection is, that's immediately adjacent to a driveway serving the property next door. So is the sensitivity of the sensor, the motion sensor, adjustable so that, you know, say a vehicle in the driveway doesn't set off the light, so that you don't have this light on and off all, you know, throughout the evening?
Yeah, that sounds like something that we should be able to handle. I do not specifically know of the motion sensor range of this product, but that seems like something that is certainly achievable in this day and age with light sensors.
And how high are all of these lights going to be mounted?
Sure. So those are mounted at the ones on the front will be mounted at the top of the at the transition between the basement and the first floor. So that's approximately 11'6" would be the underside there. The ones on the side for just refuse use, those would be a little bit lower at about, I think reasonable would be about 8 feet. And the one on the back, again, those would be about 8 feet high.
Is there any questions on the board at this point? I think what I'd like to do right now is if everyone agrees, is to open this up to the public, just to reopen the public hearing on this item. We can see if anybody here from the public is here to speak. And then we can, after that, finalize some of the questions that we've been exploring on SECRA.
Mr. Wright, if it would be okay, I would like to just, I know that there's a lot of people listening and interested in this, and if it would be okay, I would like to share a brief slides of where we have gotten to on this project from where we were, and address some of the concerns that we know have been voiced in the community.
Do you think you can limit this to 3 minutes?
I will cut out everything that's not necessary.
Okay.
You can go ahead and share.
So I just, conscious of time, this was a slide that we presented in the June and July meetings when we scaled back the project, that we are listening to the concerns of the community here. And to highlight what we have changed about this project. Initially, it was 9 units. Today it is 3. Not 4, not 5, 3 units. Initially, it was 58 feet above the grade plane. Today it is 29 feet. Initially, it was 0 feet from the north and south property line. Zoning allows for 100% lot coverage with no setbacks from any property line. We have understood and we have set the building off 3 feet. That 3 feet is not an arbitrary number. That comes from the IBC, which if you set a building 3 feet off, you can fit light and air windows on those elevations, which is very important to the planning and design of this project. Originally, there was 20 units. Today, there are 20 parking units required for the project. Today, there are 8. The initial style of the apartment building was an apartment style building. We've heard that that was not the contextual approach that was looking for. We have scaled this down. We have offered a new architectural style here that is more in line with the townhouse style appropriate for a mixed use building that is only 3 units. After that, after we reschemed, we have continued to listen to what the concerns of the community are, and we have continued to offer more concessions about what can go here. There's concerns about use restrictions. I want to start by saying that in SPN zone, you cannot have educational use, special educational uses, including music rooms. You cannot have artisanal workspaces that are intensive, including the craft brewery that's across the street. You can't have funeral parlors that are on the block. Those are all existing conditions. And we, as part of the SPN district, we signed up for not having those included in our project. But still, there is concern about what could go here. And so we have limited to no restaurant, no animal related uses. And unfortunately, we can't put in a water park and slides and make this an amusement park. But we're all right with that. And we've also heard about the tree planting and from the EAC and from the neighbors. And as Ron stated in the beginning, we are happy to replant trees to address this. And the building on the left was where we started. It is not where we are now. The building on the right is where we are. There is a 3-foot offset from the property line to our building on both the north and south elevation. As an architect, I think this sets a bad precedent for use in this. We haven't asked for zoning covenants or restrictions to anybody else's property in this neighborhood to prevent others from building and maximizing their property. We have set ours off 3 feet from that line. And again, that comes from, it's not an arbitrary, let's just make it 3 feet. It allows for, per the IBC. We've heard about parking in this, and that this is a major concern. We conducted a parking utilization study. And not only did we go to the industry standard quarter mile, but we further restricted that to a 6-minute walk to understand what was possible in this. And as we presented many times before, there is parking available. We've also talked to this board, the zoning board, and our neighbors about advocating for better parking in this district. We believe there should be better parking in this district. We have made proposals of what better parking in this district could mean, and that it shouldn't be prioritized to commuters that are coming in from Briarcliff Manor and other places. The parking should be focused on the constituents of this community, which
Take
we are
another
one
minute,
of.
please.
Yep. And so, you know, there wasn't a petition going to say, let's have better parking. There's a petition of let's not do this project, but we are on the side of let's make better parking. Let's solve this for this area. And we've also seen the neighborhood context. You know, where are there 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom units? The majority of properties in this area are 3 and 4 units, which we are 3 units. There is a 7 unit, there is a 5 unit. There's plenty of commercial properties in this area, mixed use and commercial and industrial, of which we believe that we are very contextual within on this block. And so I'll leave it there. We have, you know, we have always tried to be as forthright and as clear as we can in all of these presentations of what we are intending to do. And we've always intended to listen, and we have changed our project dramatically based on what we've heard from the constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, board members, I think after hearing that, if we can have, if we agree, a motion so we can open the public hearing on this matter.
Michael Aronson, motion to open the public hearing.
Let's reopen, I guess.
Reopen, sorry.
Eric Talbot. I second the motion to reopen the public hearing.
Any objections? No objections. The motion passes by unanimous consent. Jaime, do we have anybody from the public to speak to this?
We have one hand raised.
Okay. And I'll just ask that anybody coming in clearly introduce yourself, name and address for the record before speaking.
I am attempting to bring them in, but they're not coming in. Oh, there they are. Galaxy S21 Ultra. If you could unmute yourself.
Hey, Jaime, could you also bring in Isabel if possible?
Yes.
Thanks.
Galaxy S21 Ultra, it's a cell phone. If you could unmute yourself.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. You know, it's surprising you find out all kinds of stuff as you go along, especially with the changing of the codes around here where you could actually.
I'm sorry, just before you continue, can you just introduce yourself for the record?
Yeah, my name is James Bennett. I live at 12 Water Street.
Thank you.
You guys have heard from me before. And I guess you guys know I'm totally opposed to the project. It's like you're taking a New York City building and you stick it in the middle of a bunch of houses that were built back in the 1900s. Which I guess you guys will want to conform this whole neighborhood to some kind of a different kind of a neighborhood. But you guys looking at that project and looking at the whole thing, you know, it totally doesn't fit. Doesn't even look close to anything that fits down here. But I'm just pointing out my opposition. Eventually, you're going to wind up doing whatever it is you need to do. So just know that I'm opposed to it.
Okay.
Also, this is Clarence Mosley, 16 Water Street. So where you've heard from us, and you know, my concern is also, which I've been also telling you from the beginning, that the project is too large for the space. You know, it's a small lot, and it's like cramming. cramming as much as you can into that space. But what I don't understand is he's going on saying it's just 3 units, but then you still have the 6, underneath the 6 commercial, whatever it is that he wants to do underneath. That's more. That's cost more. Plus, don't you have to? I'm concerned about my property. I'm the one that's on the left-hand side where the garbage is going to be. Where it's going to be close. Now you're 3 feet away. Don't you have to put some kind of retainer or a retaining wall to protect my property? Because I have a garage. I have structures right on the property line. So you start digging, which I've been telling you all along, in all the meetings, you're going to compromise the properties on each side. So that, our properties have to be protected. So, you start digging, 3 feet away, my driveway, garage, and a shed are right on the property line. So that doesn't leave very much space. And not just that, which I don't, these zones were changed. I don't understand. It doesn't make no sense at all to be able to build on 100% of the property. How are you going to do that without coming on our property to build that there? How are you gonna put windows in, on the outside 3 feet away the property line without coming on to the surrounding properties to do that? That property barely has enough space to even put any kind of equipment on the property if you're building on the whole property. It's the project itself just doesn't make sense because it's too large for the area. Even removing those trees, if you pull those trees out, those trees are almost as tall as go as long as the size of the whole, the whole lot, and you have to pull those out and remove them. It's a lot of stuff. I know the property because I was, born and raised down there. The property was abandoned for a reason. It's the house was sinking that was on the property when I was a teenager. But you have stuff, you have debris, it has to be cleaned. You have an oil tank in the ground in the property. It's a lot of things that, have to be done that's a concern for us down there, so it's just, but I'm concerned about my property and the compromise that's going to happen. Everything, now the pitch is is turned towards my property where, we run off. If you gotta do some kind of retainer and then you gotta put drainage too, is that going to be correct? It's a lot of concern. I just think that this is the wrong project for the space. I think it's still too large. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosley. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Okay. Do we have anybody else here to speak? Any other hands up? If you're in the public and you use the hand raise function.
Nope, nobody else.
Okay. As there is nobody else there to speak, can we have a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
Nina Aaron, motion to adjourn public hearing.
Michael Aronson, second the motion.
May
Any
I, before a
objections?
vote is called, I apologize for interrupting. May I just respond to a couple of quick points that the neighbors raised?
Amanda, can he respond to points outside of the public hearing as the applicant in this meeting? So we can, yeah. So I would like to.
Thank you.
So we had a motion and a second. Are there any objections to adjourning the public hearing? With no objections, the motion passes by unanimous consent. Mr. Seiserwall?
Thank you. I apologize again. Just a couple of points responsive. Jaime raised the point about sound during construction. We do not expect any atypical construction sounds, certainly no vibrations or sounds the way it would be if there's blasting. In fact, I note that one of the neighbors just mentioned that the house had been sinking and that's why it was raised at one point. that suggests to me that the ground's pretty soft and, you know, excavation shouldn't be too bad. As far as excavating within proximity of property lines, we're no longer on the property line, and that enables us a little more accommodation. Of course, there are laws that we will comply with that control supportive excavation based on depths and proximity property lines. I think we are now, you know, we had discussed with neighbors when we had the larger project and building to the property line and having to excavate deeper, potential supportive excavation issues. We had with one of the neighbor who mentioned his shed, we had offered to solely at our cost, move all the possessions out, put them in storage, demo the shed, do our construction and rebuild a new shed and then move everything out. He was not interested in doing that. You know, the fact that we're now within our own property line, I don't believe we have any vibratory or supportive excavation issues. That was certainly a consideration that we gave when we scaled our property back as drastically as we did.
And just take another moment because we do need to move on with this discussion. And yeah,
I am completely done. Thank you. That was perfect.
Thank you.
I think, Seth, that that Mr. Mosley's concerns, despite the fact that this project isn't going to be built up to the property lines, are, well taken. It's a residential area and it's a small lot. So there's always the option of the board considering a construction management plan to help, address any sort of like truck traffic or equipment movement on the site, anything like that. But that's something that could be addressed as a condition of your approval. And Callard Sessions, I'm sure you probably know more about those types of plans than I do. But I'm sure it would help allay some neighbor concerns about construction impacts and certainly that sort of concern.
Right, and then that actually speaks to some of the items I wanted to kind of just close the loop on a little bit in terms of the SECRA kind of conversation and the environmental impact. So both in terms of kind of construction noise, I know specifically, I don't know, Jaime, if it would be helpful. I mean, the best way to scaffold this conversation, we started the conversation, last week, and we had a couple of open items. We've touched, I think, on a lot of the main issues, not all of them. But I think it would be helpful to have kind of a plan coming out of this meeting so that we can instruct staff to work out some of the details before we come back to our next meeting. So that we have by our next meeting, we have a clearer sense of where that secret review is. So, I know we had a couple of questions coming out of Thursday, I think that we haven't touched on. Sorry, I've got way too many windows open on my computer as I'm searching through them. But, we looked at, I think, questions, just closed it, 9, 13, and 18, I think is specifically where we had open issues.
Yeah, I have that ahead of us.
Okay.
Available and already sort of halfway filled out.
Okay.
So if you'd like, we can kind of move on to that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
If I could, just real quick, I want to make sure that we're doing the proper follow-up on our end. So one of the questions that I need to follow up is asking the arborist to give us the general health of those trees, to sort of verify whether they're healthy or not. One of the questions is to reach out to Recreation DPW to ask for locations for tree replacement, providing that information back to you. And so the third item, which I think you started talking about but haven't really made a decision on, is whether or not you would like a construction management plan from the applicant. Sort of detailing what's going to happen and the steps to ensuring that there's minimal disturbance to the neighbors. Is that something you would like?
I think it's a good idea.
I think as part of that plan, it could touch on one of the items we spoke about last week specifically was the need for any kind of street closures or detours, for equipment setup, cranes, whatever may be part of this construction. So I think a construction management plan would be a good idea.
Yeah, I definitely would be in favor of a construction management plan. And I am a little concerned about just sort of foundation stability issues. I don't know how far down, the digging is going to go. And I recognize that there's now a 3-foot separation between the property line of the adjacent owner, but if the construction management plan could specifically address stabilizing adjacent properties or retaining walls if needed in terms of foundations, that would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, there was a question that it was raised by the arborist that was reflected in the report, but not exactly detailed, which is essentially depending on how that patio is in the backyard, whether they need to excavate significantly to put in that patio in the back of the property, or whether it's just going to be essentially a patio on grade, would go a long way in determining what impact it would have on the root system, because it would basically dictate how much of that root in that tree would have to come out as well. So that's a question. The applicant does have their hand raised.
Yeah, Eric, you can respond to the patio question specifically.
Yes, the patio, in the plan that was submitted today, it shows that the patio steps all the way back to the building line. And so that creates an offset of, from the center of that tree to the building, 11 feet, a little over 11 feet, and from the center of the tree to the adjacent, to the south edge of the patio, 6.2.
And what kind of excavation are you going to need even for the patio? Because I know the arborist was concerned even with it was a different setback that he reviewed, but.
Well, that's precisely the point for that pad that steps up. So that gets minimal excavation anyway. The foundation line is the line that is 11 feet from that tree. And so I think that's a reasonable amount.
Understood.
May I also mention, and this is worthy, I apologize, this is worthy of having the arborist take a look at it, but also you have to appreciate the topography of that slope. We're not talking about a flat slope where we're building a building right here next to the tree. We're talking about a slope like this where we're building a building next to a tree, such that the topography itself is limiting to that root ball. And that's worthy of having the arborist take a look at.
Yeah, I mean, the arborist, so to kind of clarify, because it would be great to have, I think, the arborist take a look at that plan a little bit closer to understand it. But his concern was essentially that the tree is leaning away from your property and towards the Seeker Road. And essentially cutting the roots, he wasn't so concerned about it killing the tree as much as he was concerned about it because of rain and wind events, especially like the ones that we've been having recently, that it would take away the strength of that root system to hold that tree up, that it may become more prone to falling rather than just dying. It might fall because of construction activities.
We totally agree with you, and we're happy to take it down. We just can't take it down ourselves. We totally agree with you that the cautious step, particularly because we're in agreement for replacing that caliper diameter, assuming it's a healthy tree, as we've talked about, is preferred.
I mean, has the arborist seen the most recent drawings with the revised setback?
I know that the building inspector forwarded some stuff, so I'm not sure what he's seen. He has not seen this. I haven't seen this.
This plan that we're looking at on the screen here is the same section that has been submitted since I believe this was an August submission to this section.
I think the revision you noted a moment ago was just in plan.
Just in plan, yep, showing this, that it notches out that corner, but the section has been submitted in August or maybe September. I apologize.
And the prior patio was notched. This one, you've effectively eliminated that section of patio.
Yeah, so the prior section or the prior plan, this is what we had, kind of just marked up,
right? Got it.
To say that we could do to accommodate this. And what we drew up was that if you do that, you can take out that whole corner there.
Okay, understood. Okay, I just want to kind of move this along. Jaime, do we have we're going to kind of try to finish up our conversation on those open questions if we can.
Okay,
bring
all right.
our mostly completed.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and
we should just make sure the arborist understands the current scope of work, and he can just kind of either confirm his opinion on that point or update it.
We are intending to do this with panelized construction, which will greatly increase the speed of construction and reduce duration as well.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So
going through the questions, if I can, so the impact on land was worked on, but there was a couple of questions here that remain. One was the proposed action may involve construction on slopes of 15% or greater. We talked about that. The applicant, I think, probably can weigh in on how much of the site has slopes of 15% or greater and how much construction is taking place on those.
Not they can get back to us on that question. I don't know if they're not prepared to answer.
Can you ask the question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So it says here the proposed action may involve construction on slopes of 15% or greater.
I believe we are at officially 17%.
Okay. So the next, go ahead.
No. I said we'll discuss that one, but if you can go ahead, the next question. All
right, next question is proposed action may result in increased erosion, whether from physical disturbance or vegetation removal, including from treatment by herbicides. The applicant provided some drawings that showed that the side of the property would have kind of riprap gravel, I'm assuming, to prevent erosion. The drawing where I saw that most recently was on the photometric plan, but I believe it's on the site plan.
Would this also be dealt with by a construction management plan? Could this also be incorporated in the erosion controls? I mean, I know Joe, you're also reviewing that.
It's in every detail on the site civil package that shows those sections through that and what the build up. This is the architectural set. The site civil set produced by Creighton Manning has sections through that illustrate the build up there.
Yeah, so you can see that detail right here, and this is part of the way that the soil drains is capturing that water on site through this riprap and kind of channeling it down to the new catch basin that they're going to put in front of the property.
That's the final condition. During construction, they also have temporary erosion and sediment controls that are made part of the engineering plan package to protect the site from sediment transport during construction. So silt fence, tree removal, temporary construction access, and the like would all be made part of that erosion control plan.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you have enough information here to make a decision on this one.
I agree. Okay. Yeah, I mean, to me, I think that the mitigation measures that we're discussing, I wouldn't say that it would be a minimal impact. There's small impact.
All right. So moving on down, there's no impact.
Jaime?
Okay.
Does any of the rest of the board have any opinions on this? Okay.
It's not.
All right.
Okay. Do you want to make a decision on the proposed action may involve construction on slopes of 15% or greater?
We should. I mean, the slope on the site is greater than 15%, so they they will be working there. As far as, we could just go up to the top, the first question on this one. So
So it's proposed action may involve construction on physical alteration of the land surface of the proposed site. So that's a yes. The question here is whether or not there's a moderate to large impact due to the construction on the slope of 15% or greater, or whether it's a small impact, because it is happening. It is going to be larger than 50%. It's just a question of whether it's a moderate to large impact or a small impact.
board members' thoughts?
I have a question.
You just muted yourself, Eric.
Sorry. I have a quick question about this particular item. Is there a threshold for the proposed act? I think it's pretty small threshold, right, for the slope disturbance in terms of the actual area or the amount of land.
You mean in the code?
Well, I am thinking of the code. I am thinking of the steep slope code.
Steep slope code covers, I think, what slopes to 25% and above, where the planning board has to make a decision on whether to grant construction after 25%.
Okay, great. All right, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, I think this question really looks, all of these questions are interconnected. I mean, we're looking at the shape of the land, we're looking at the drainage, we're looking at the impact of the intervention that they're doing on this slope, which is greater than 15%. We've talked about some of the both construction and kind of, constructed conditions, and how they're dealing with drainage, how they're dealing with this slope, and how they're dealing with water on this slope. They're actually, part of the conversation we just had, talking about the setbacks that are remaining on either side, these 3-foot setbacks. So those setbacks will, mimic the, the grade of the hill that will remain in those two strips. Is there any, what will the impact of this be in on this hill and on the way that this hill works and drains and deals with water, I guess.
And I just want to point out, Seth, that Eric's question is relevant because we have in our steep slopes code 15 slopes of 15% or greater are considered steep slopes, but for planning board purposes, you are allowed to construct or regrade a slope with a sloped area is greater than 15%, but less than 25%. You just have to minimize, that construction or regrading. And then when you're building on slopes greater than 25%, that's when the planning board has to make their specific finding that, the construction is warranted by considerations that make alternative approaches impracticable. So the fact that this is a 17% slope, you're within that 15 to 25% where construction is allowed but should be minimized, but you're not above the 25% threshold where construction is like extremely discouraged, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, how does and I want to avoid getting into the weeds because I'm trying to be mindful of time here, but as far as that, that 15 is the code prescription versus the kind of secret determination and what's the relationship between those?
I just think it adds to the context. And for purposes of you making this determination of magnitude, you have to think of what's the scale here of the project, the size and intensity of the project, what is the context of the site in its relation to adjacent parcels, which you were getting at with, the sediment and erosion control measures that are going to be put in place. And then the overall magnitude of the setting, the severity of any impacts that are going to result from this. There you go.
Amanda, if I may, please. I think it's Jaime going to that. There's another site, Jaime, that actually addresses specifically this sub-question. It highlights in green, like that box is highlighted. It says the proposed action may involve construction on slopes of 15% or greater. And when you read it, it talks about the dangers of steep slopes, which involve instability, but mostly erosion and potential runoff to to water bodies. I think it was said in other sections that we don't have a direct water body issue. And if you look at the sub-analysis, and of course my screen is just, I'm getting logged out here. If you look at the sub-analysis questions, because it gives you, in addition, the manual gives you sub-analysis questions beyond the sub-analysis questions on the form itself. And those questions ask questions like, are you placing the structure on the top of that steep slope?
Mm-hmm.
That's the stability issue. Of course, we're not. And what are the water bodies that might be harmed immediately harmed by this discharge? And then if you look following those sub-analysis questions, it says, okay, well, what is a small, what is no or small, what's moderate to large? And the no or small is talking about how much of the site has a slope. Our site has very little slope on it.
That's
It's just
not,
in the rear.
that's not what your EAF part 1 says, actually.
That I'm reading from the manual on the DEC website.
I do apologize. I need to jump in here again. So we have land use counsel here to help the planning board make these determinations. I don't think that you are intended to do this, but the appearance might be that you're sort of educating the planning board on legal questions.
I'm speaking directly. I'm speaking directly to land use counsel. I'm speaking directly to land use counsel. I think it's completely appropriate, Jaime, that I speak directly to land use counsel on this point, as I am my client's land use counsel.
As we're running this conversation right now, I'd like to hear from Amanda and Jaime so that we can kind of explore this question together as a board right now.
Yeah, so Ron was reading from the question 1 workbook, which is definitely relevant because that's what question you're talking about right now. And it goes through the analysis of what would constitute a small impact for this question and what would constitute a moderate to large impact for this question. And I did jump on him when he was reading directly from the workbook, which says it would be a small impact if only a small portion of the site contains slopes of 15% and building is limited. Their EAF does provide that 100% of the site is covered with slopes of 15% or greater. So I don't know if that's a particularly relevant piece of the small impact analysis. Visibility, another piece of the small impact analysis, will visibility not be increased due to position on a slope? Any cut and fill needed can be done without creating slopes greater than 15% with appropriate erosion control measures. I think those are definitely relevant for purposes of a small impact. And then moderate to large impact could, you might be looking at something where visibility will be increased due to position on a slope, removal of large areas of vegetation on steep slopes from the site, building on steep slopes next to streams or riverbanks with a history of unstable soils, and extensive excavation on steep slopes where cut and fill will leave slopes steeper than exist now. So those are some important considerations because Keller and Sessions can weigh in here, but I don't believe that the construction will leave the slopes steeper than they are now. I don't believe that this construction will be situated in such a way that it will be visually worse as a result of the steep slopes, since they're building into the slope. They're not building on top of the slope. And then there's no adjacency to streams or riverbanks where there are unstable soils. So those are some key points.
I think, Amanda, the only applicable moderate to large impact would be the removal of the large area of vegetation.
Right.
I don't think anything else.
The only thing that I would add to that piece is that when you talk about a large area, it's sort of you may want to take into consideration the size of the lot itself, which is not in itself a large area. So even though a large percentage of the lot is being removed to vegetation, the entire lot, it itself is not a large lot. So it's not a large lot encompassing a large area that's being totally removed. Rather, it's a very small lot with very little room to put anything on it that is being cleared.
I agree with that.
I agree with that as well. Again, I just want to, be helpful to hear from some of the board members on their opinions, especially on this item.
I'm generally am leaning towards no or small impact as opposed to moderate to large. I mean, the only thing I guess, you know, the fact that the entire site is 15% or more of a slope of 15% or more, but I generally think that the impact is small as opposed to moderate to large.
I agree with what Michael is saying, and it was very helpful that you went through what was small and what was, you know, moderate or large, because I was struggling with this one. But having heard all of this, to me, it comes down more on the small impact.
Does anyone else want to weigh on the board? On the board want to weigh in? I agree with both Nina and Michael.
Yeah, this is Eric Talbot. I agree with Nina and Michael and Seth. I think that, you know, if it were a larger parcel, then, you know, then we would have to reconsider that impact. But I think it was a helpful conversation, kind of flesh out the finer detail of how to look at this in consideration of this form. So that's it.
All right, moving on to the next topic of discussion. Impact on geological features. The proposed action may result in the modification, destruction, or inhibit access to any unique or unusual landforms on the site. So we said no here, or you said no. Impacts on surface water. This was reviewed. The proposed action may affect one or more wetlands and other surface water bodies. Said no here. So didn't answer any of the sub questions. Impact on groundwater. The proposed action may result in new or additional use of groundwater or may have the potential to introduce contaminants to groundwater or an aquifer. Said no here. So didn't answer any of the sub questions. Impact on flooding. The proposed action may result in development on land subject to flooding. Due to a lack of clarity, wrote that yes, it might potentially. And so you went through the questions here and determined based off of all the questions that the answer would be no to all of those. Impacts on air. So you went, the question was proposed action may include a state regulated air emission source. It does not. So answer was no there. Impact on plants and animals. The proposed action may result in the loss of flora or fauna. The answer is yes there. And then I think you were able to answer all of the questions of trees. So there's an important note here. You have loss of mature trees on the site. The applicant has offered, and I think that the expectation is that if this were approved, that you would be adding a tree replacement plan. So we have, you know, here in the planning department, we have our next steps to reach out to the arborist to find out about the health of the trees that will be impacted by this development, as well as reaching out to REC and DPW to come up with a tree replacement plan. And we'll work with, you know, once we have that together, we'll work internally to come up with something that makes sense, and we'll reach out to the applicant as well, make sure that they're aware of where we are in the process. Impact on agricultural resources. The proposed action may impact agricultural resources. The answer is no. Impact on aesthetic resources. The land use of the proposed action are obviously different from or are in sharp contrast to current land use patterns between the proposed project and a scenic or aesthetic resource. So the project is close to a scenic resource, the Hudson River, based off of the EAF mapper. So wrote yes there, and then you answered the first couple of questions. There was some questions about how to evaluate C. So the proposed action may be visible from publicly accessible vantage points, either seasonal or year round. So I'm going to pull up the EAF workbook, and we can kind of dig into that question a little bit better.
Yeah, and I spent some time reviewing this as well. It really kind of looks at you know, the resources, the river, the vantage points, you know, are possibly from Secor Road looking over the building, but it's unclear whether there, you know, from my perspective, if there is any impact on the kind of the view of the river from Secor, but the handbook does say that, it doesn't apply to a spot that has a limited view, like a fleeting view or a passing view from a random, kind of a small section of sidewalk. So I was satisfied on that first question there.
Okay. Do you want me to read the small impacts as listed and the moderate to large impacts as listed?
Yeah, I think we should.
Okay. All right. So some examples of small impacts that might fall into this category are: the project will be partly visible, but is not in sharp contrast with other existing land uses in the area. The applicant has, shown that there are other similarly sized projects there. There are other similarly sized land uses in the area in terms of mixed use. The project will be partly to mostly visible, but is very far away from the scenic resource and is not in sharp contrast to existing land uses in the area. Again, it does appear to be in some similarity in terms of land use to the projects in the area. It may not be of the same architectural style, but it is, as a land use, pretty similar, and it is not particularly close to the Hudson River. A limited portion of the project will be visible, but from very few publicly accessible locations. I don't think that applies here. I mean, it's on the street, it is publicly available, but the project will be visible, but vegetation or other factors such as distance and topography screen and soften the visibility of it. The property has no trees. The arborist did recommend placing some trees behind the building, if possible, to help with the replacement of some of the plants that are cut down, some of the trees are cut down. So that is a possibility. I think that the applicant considered, has not at this point considered, but if the planning board wanted them to consider, could add there in terms of adding some screening in the back. The back of the property, I'm trying to remember here, goes about 1 story above the grade of the property on Seeker Road, but tops out close to at grade with Seeker Road, I think. So it's, I don't know if the applicant can kind of weigh in on the veracity of that statement. I think that's correct.
Would you let, I can, in that same section, the top of our building will be just slightly above Secor Road. We don't have an official topo of that, but there's a large step between that property that's directly to the east, and then there's about a 6-foot wall that goes from it maybe higher up to Secor Road. And so we believe it will be very minimal between the elevation of Secor Road and the elevation of our roof.
I also just think it's important for purposes of this question that the board knows what a publicly accessible vantage point is, because it says it at the beginning of this section. It's publicly accessible vantage points may be scenic viewing spots, identified road pull-offs and overlooks, parks and greens, road sections within a scenic byway, or other locally designated spots. These are locations where one can view a scenic or aesthetic resource, which in this case is the river. So I think that is really relevant for this question.
Yep. All right, the going through the moderate to large impacts, some examples of moderate to large impacts that might fall into this category are: the project will be visible and is in sharp contrast to surrounding land uses by virtue of its scale, dimension, color, or height. The project is not in sharp contrast to existing land uses in the area, but is very visible. The project will obstruct or partially obstruct publicly accessible views of the scenic resource, which in this case is the Hudson River, or the project is situated so that it changes the visual aspect of the scenic resource.
Yeah, let's go back into the. Yeah. I mean, I think that was, to me, that's no or small impact.
I would agree. I mean, certainly there are other buildings along Secor Road that would block the view of the what's it called? The aesthetic resource more than this building, I think.
And I don't even know that we have any, accessible vantage points
Right.
as it's defined in that
Right.
particular section.
Right.
But I think even if you're taking a broader sense of that, if you were to say that all of the sidewalks in Ossining are public vantage points, I think even in that, under that definition, this would still be a small impact.
Yeah, agreed.
I also agree. You know, and having,
I should mention, Isabel, that you're a voting member on this project. So you're not just functioning here as a, if you are comfortable voting, you would have a vote ultimately on this project.
We're not voting tonight, but
No,
you
yeah, you're not
you can
voting, but you
participate.
can weigh in on this. All
Thank you, Jaime. I just wanted to chime in. I do agree. I think that the revised building design now is actually size-wise is comparable to everything in the surrounding areas. So the impact is no or small as well.
Yeah, and I would agree with my fellow board members that the impact is no or small as well too. I visited the site recently, and you can see right now there's tree foliage visible from that particular part of the sidewalk, but based on the redesign, I think that it's no impact.
Okay. So next is the situation or activity in which viewers are engaged while viewing the proposed action is routine travel by residents, including travel to and from work, recreational or tourism-based activities. So apologies, I have to get to the right place here. All right, so the situation or activity in which the viewers of proposed action is routine travel. When a proposed project is part or visible from a scenic or aesthetic resource, it will be viewed by many different people in different circumstances. This question explores whether the project site is in a location that will be viewed on a daily and constant basis by members of the community, and or if it is within a location that also has an important role in recreation or tourism economy of the area. Both are important, and changes to scenic and aesthetic resources may have adverse impacts on both the quality of life of residents and broader impact. So I think that's an important notation here. Really, that's the key is this part of or visible from a scenic or aesthetic resource, which is the Hudson River. And it's, I don't think it is. So if you'd like, we can go into the details on small impact. But I don't think it's what it has here for small impact. It says the project site is visible from minor roads used by a limited number of local residents only and is not part of a recreational or tourism related activity. That seems to fit well. And a limited portion of the project site is visible, but because it is not in sharp contrast to the scenic resource or surrounding land uses, there will be no diminishment of the designated resource. Again, it's not right next to the Hudson River. That first one seems to be applicable. For moderate to large impact, the project site is visible from major roads and highly traveled routes used by many residents and visitors. Water Street is a pretty minor road. It's visible also from the back of Seeker Road, which is heavily used locally, but it's not a major road, as well as Main Street. Both of those are access roads to getting to the waterfront or to the train station primarily. The project site is visible, and because it is in sharp contrast to the scenic resource and surrounding land uses, will significantly reduce enjoyment and appreciation of the scenic resource. And again, the project is not visible from the Hudson River.
I mean, I actually interpret it the other way around, that it is visible when looking at the Hudson River. But even with that, I look at this because the river is the resource, you're looking at the water. But even still, I feel like it's minimally visible. It's certainly not a impacting tourism or recreation. And while it's near the train station, so people do go back and forth, people walk up and down Secor. I think that it's the second bullet point under small impact is very salient. At the limited portion of the project site is visible, but it's not in sharp contrast to the scenic resource or the surrounding land uses. It'll be another effectively rooftop amongst rooftops that you're going to be looking at as you look over that hill. And I think it's a small impact.
I would agree.
I would agree too. It meets all the criteria of small impact.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it will be an impact to the immediate neighbors, but in the scheme of what we're discussing here, it's a small impact, and as Seth said, it's one roof in a bunch of them, having walked around down there and taken a look at the neighborhood. I would see it as a small impact.
Okay, so that looks at D and E. The next question is, I'm sorry, I apologize. Did everyone get a?
We're on to the next, right?
I think, okay.
Next question.
All right. So the next question.
No, we do have, yeah.
Unless Isabel had something to add to that.
No, I don't. I agree. It's minimal impact.
So the next question is F. There are similar projects visible within the following distance of the proposed project.
I feel like we discussed this one on Thursday. I mean, we kind of discussed several projects in that vicinity. We can look at what small impact is. We can look at the overview quickly, but
yeah, the project is fully or partially visible, but there are other land uses of similar scale, design, density, dimension, or location, both nearby and far away. So the context of the same resource does not change.
Yeah, I feel that there are other projects of this scale in the immediate vicinity. Especially the radiuses that are called out specifically on the form. 0 to half mile.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments or no to small impact?
I agree with Seth.
I also agree. I think it's 0 to minimal impact.
Me too.
Agreed.
Okay, impact on historic and archaeological resources. The proposed action may occur in or adjacent to a historic or archaeological resource. The answer there is yes. The historic resource is the train station. And so you answered that most of those questions, but not all of them. So there was no, you answered all.
That
of
was
them.
only if, yeah,
Yeah,
it's not applicable.
Yeah, so you answered all those questions. So impact on open space and recreation. Proposed action may result in the loss of recreational opportunities or reduction of open space resource as designated in any adopted municipal open space plan. So the answer here is no. Just for the general public to clarify, open space as adopted in a municipal open space plan is what you're looking at here. So even though it is a vacant lot right now, it's not part of any adopted municipal open space plan. So it's not like the loss of a park or even a vacant lot that is, deemed to be eligible to be turned into a park or used as just empty forest. So it's not part of a plan. It's just a vacant lot. So that's why I voted no there. Impact on critical environmental areas. The proposed action may be located within or adjacent to a critical environmental area. The answer was yes, because I believe it is in a critical environmental area. It's the Hudson River Valley, but you reviewed those questions and determined that no, a small impact may occur. Impact on transportation. The proposed action may result in a change to existing transportation systems. So just in order to go through the questions, said yes to make sure that all the questions were asked. The project traffic increase may exceed capacity of existing road network, said no. Proposed action may result in the construction of paved parking area for 500 or more vehicles. That's a no. The proposed action will degrade existing transit access. No there. Proposed action will degrade existing pedestrian or bicycle accommodations. Said no. The proposed action may alter the present pattern of movement, people or goods. Said no. This was a situation where you had to get into other impacts. So parking is not being provided for this project. It's required to have 8 spaces. As a result of this project moving forward, it would require a parking waiver that this board would have to grant. So in order to grant that parking waiver, you would have to complete the seeker process. And so completing the seeker process can go a couple of ways. One would be to make a positive declaration that this is going to have a significant environmental impact. If you did a positive deck at this stage, that would lead directly to an EIS moving forward and being done to determine whether or not this property and this project would have a major environmental impact. Normally EISs are reserved for major projects. The alternative is to sort of acknowledge that it is going to have an impact, say no to small impact, and ultimately you would do a neg deck at this point. I think this is a question that we don't have any obvious clarity. We can reach into the seeker handbook for this. So you have to kind of make a decision about how you feel about this. Parking is not being provided for this project. I'm going to add a note that 8 parking spaces are required.
Right. I mean, this ties into a lot of the, well, this is part of a bigger conversation that we've been having all along on this project. Can we answer this question and the waiver separately? I mean,
You can't vote on the waiver until you vote on the seeker. You don't need to vote on the seeker today. You don't even need to make a decision today on this, but you do have a lot of information. So the applicant has provided a parking study. We've asserted that there is parking in the area. If you'd like, we can kind of go over the parking study a little further. If you'd like to ask the applicant any questions on that parking study, you can do that. You've also had a significant amount of comments from people who live in the area that have expressed concern about the lack of parking in the neighborhood. So you have gotten a lot of information, I think, sort of to analyze this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the current project with 3 residential units, which with the downstairs commercial units, with its proximity to the train station parking, we've looked at the parking study, and I don't know that we need to pull it up again because I think Eric, it was part of Eric's presentation a moment ago where he did reiterate kind of what they looked at there, the 6-minute walking radius versus the kind of the code required radius. I think there's a question there will be impact. There'll be some additional cars there. I think the kind of quantifying that as small versus moderate is the question that we're trying to answer. I think that in my opinion, while it will be an impact because of the limited scale of the project at this point and the number of cars and some of the mitigation measures and the proximity to some larger parking lots, especially for some of the commercial parking and for folks who may work there and may use that. I think it's reasonable to call it small. I wish that the handbook spoke more closely to this particular item, but this is an item that we're inserting in here because we feel it's relevant to this question and it's not asked elsewhere in this list. So I would be important to hear from other members.
Yeah, I agree. To me, it's a small impact. I walk around this area a lot, and particularly, I guess, with COVID, there's a lot of available parking that I see down in that area. I don't know whether the village has considered changing some of the parking on the street down there that right now is permit parking only because it's never used anymore. And I know that it probably was necessary pre-COVID, but I don't know whether we're ever going back to the same numbers of people commuting 5 days a week. And so for the last 18 months down there, there's a lot of parking as far as I see walking around down there frequently. So, and I'm not in favor of parking minimums anyway. So to me, this would be a small impact. It's not a big project. And there is available parking, metered parking as well on the other side of the train station that's within a couple of minutes walk.
I would tend to agree with Nina, except that, I mean, I did used to, commute into the city every day and use the permit parking. And now when I go into the city, I need to use the metered parking on the other side of the train tracks. If you do not get there early, there often is not enough unless you want to walk to the Quimby Street lot, which is far, and I wouldn't necessarily want to come back from that lot late at night. So one of the things that actually some people have suggested to me, and I don't know if the board can assist with this at all in terms of is having a discussion with the mayor, the board of trustees about perhaps making some of the permit parking lot available as a paid parking spot to help people who are just, I agree totally with Nina in terms of and whether, question whether we'll ever go back to the, completely full parking lots of my past, but perhaps there are some ways in which we could both address concerns of commuters as well as the residents who live in this neighborhood who seem to be very concerned about the parking, that perhaps we could recommend that there be some more paid parking spaces made available that after 6 o'clock become, free space spots in the permit parking anyway.
I like that idea a lot. I think that would be great because right now, a lot of that permit parking just sits completely empty.
Right. And I mean, it's true that people who may move into this development could very well use the permit parking after hours, but there is the issue of what do people do who live in the neighborhood or who are visiting the neighborhood do during, the hours, the work hours when parking needs to be paid for. But all that being said, I would, agree with Nina that it's small impact.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the board, understands you're evaluating the parking based on the code provisions and the situation as it stands today. But I do think that, you can talk about proposing discussions with the Board of Trustees and the mayor about your broader concerns about parking separately, not necessarily in relation to this application. That's a separate issue, which I'm not making any sort of a value judgment on, but just make sure you're evaluating this question based on conditions today.
Can I make a comment real quick? And I think that what Amanda just spoke about, I think to me is what I'm kind of like zeroing in on, which is like, we want to be focused on this environmental analysis and answering it accurately. But even though, and I do agree, like from a project perspective, that it is a small impact based on these criteria. But I do think the amount of public comment, though some of it has come from repeatedly come from same individuals, that this is an issue. Parking is an issue that needs to be addressed. And with the zoning like it is, if additional developments, not even thinking about, thinking about the hypothetical of future developments, you're just going to continue to strain the parking supply. And I do think that it's like, if we're going to go through this process and listen to these comments, it's important for us to communicate out to the Board of Trustees, this is the feedback that we're getting. And we want to be responsible and be good stewards of the community. But there, we like to make a recommendation based on what we're hearing. And I think flexible parking spaces is definitely a smart way to go. I was also down at the train station this week myself, and yeah, there were a lot of empty spaces. Now come nighttime, I don't know what the street looks like, but clearly there was a lot of capacity in the parking lots, in the community lot. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I want to, because I know that there's a lot of, this has come up before. I think this was discussed even as going on the work session, at the last work session, if we had time. We obviously didn't have enough time to talk about it, but what we can do is we can add this as an agenda item to a subsequent meeting to talk about crafting a letter to send to the planning board or to send to the board of trustees requesting that they, look into this. And so we'll get that on the agenda for next month.
Thanks, Jaime. With all this conversation, is there anyone else on the board who wants to speak to this specific project, the additional 8 spaces that are required and the impact that those spaces will have?
Hi, this is Isabel. I just want to make a comment. I was just reading the description in the workbook, and it notes that if there's no parking that are being proposed, and that the proposed parking can be used by utilizing existing off-street parking, then this will be likely no related impacts. So I do acknowledge that there's a parking issue that's been brought up multiple times, but I guess in answering this question particularly, I would agree with my board members and also say that there's no too small impact for this particular project.
Thanks. I think we've heard from everybody here on this item.
Yep, I'm sorry, I was just writing a note down.
Yeah, that's okay.
So moving on, the impact on energy. So the proposed action may cause an increase in the use of any form of energy. The answer is yes. You went through the questions and all of them said no. Impact on noise, odor, and light. The proposed action may result in an increase in noise, odors, or outdoor lighting. The answer was yes. Didn't answer all of the questions. The proposed action may produce sound above noise levels established by local regulation. So the answer here is no. I think it deserves some clarification. I think just to get to that. So the construction noises are regulated by the building code. So there are regulations that the building department imposes, and the applicant has to adhere to those. They've already acknowledged that they would adhere to those. So it's not to say that construction will not create noise, rather that they have to adhere to any code provisions that pertain to construction. And that's how you got to know last time, but I want to say it for the general public who's here today as well. The proposed action may result in blasting within 1,500 feet of any residence. The applicant was on the record today saying that there would not be any blasting at this time. There isn't any expectation of any blasting. So don't expect that. And the proposed action may result in routine orders for more than 1 hour per day.
I think we let that open because of just construction clarifications, but we didn't expect that to be an issue either. But we wanted the applicant to be on record, just confirming that there were no.
I jumped ahead a little bit here, so I just want to make sure, is everybody comfortable with me putting no or small impact on the proposed action regarding blasting? Yes?
Yes, based on what we've heard today, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The proposed action, so for C, I don't know if the applicant wants to weigh in?
Sure, this is type 5B construction. It is all wood construction. There's a concrete foundation. None of those would emit an odor. There's nothing unique about this.
That sounds reasonable to me.
I agree.
Agreed.
I also agree.
Okay. I'd also add that none of the uses that we looked at during the last meetings, we discussed this previously, would lend themselves to resulting in odors either.
Okay. Proposed action may result in light shining onto adjoining properties. So the applicant did provide, the photo.
The photometric chart.
Plan. Yeah. So I'm going to pull that up real quick because I do want to clarify this. It does shine ever so slightly on the neighbor's property to the tune of probably about, a foot or so. But the applicant noted that these are lights that would only come on when people are walking past. So when people are taking out the trash, otherwise they would stay off. And the board asked that they face any light so that it was only catching people who are coming out of this door rather than if somebody's driving down the block or driving into his driveway, if the neighbor's driving into his driveway, so that they wouldn't get caught by that. They're going to look into that. If you would like more detail, you can wait for that. But
yeah, I mean, and I don't want to open up a whole other conversation on this as well, but I guess, and I haven't looked at the site plan recently, but is there any screening or fencing on that lot line? There's not, correct? It's just open to the edge of the next property.
it's slab on grade, and currently I think that there is nothing there. I don't even think there are any shrubs or anything there right now.
Okay.
We could lower those lights, and if those lights became just walkway lights, then that would decrease the overage onto those. If we lowered the height of those.
I mean, I would ask the applicant if they could be lowered or possibly just re-aimed to avoid spilling onto the neighboring property. I don't think that would be unreasonable given, I think that looks like it would be doable.
We could look at that. We're happy to look at that, but I do note here that if you look at the lumen scale on that same figure, there's very little lumens that actually escape. When they do escape, they escape only onto the driveway. There is a lot of other ambient commercial property lighting out there on the property. We'll absolutely look at it, but this is kind of a lot of the minimal exceedance could be washed by other ambient lighting in the area.
Can we go back to the questions, Jaime?
The question is, the proposed action may result in light shining on adjoining properties. This is a good opportunity for the workbook to get to that point. So the proposed action may result in light shining onto adjoining properties. The proposed action may result in lighting, creating sky glow brighter than existing area conditions. So you want to look at what is the source of lighting, location, height, direction, and aim. What is the average? What is the type and wattage of the bulb? And what will the color of the light be? What hours will the lights be illuminated? And are automatic timers planned? How close is the lighting to the nearest occupied structure or public thoroughfare? What are the existing sky glow conditions? What will the proposed project change existing conditions? If so, for how long and how much of the area will be impacted? Will lighting cause glare or spillage onto the neighboring properties or roads? Are there any natural barriers that will prevent light spillage and glare, or are any mitigation measures included, such as screen, such as vegetation, typography, or fencing?
I think if you look at the second bullet under small impact, it speaks directly to this issue, to this situation. I apologize.
So before we get to the small impact questions, I think that one of the concerns of the neighbors was that people are going to be walking past. The light's going to be shining on when they're walking to take out the trash. I think that the sort of secondary concern of that is that if people are taking out trash at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, and the light pops on and they make noise, you could certainly ask the applicant to have the light. If they are gonna have a light that only comes on when people walk past, to make sure that it doesn't go off past a certain hour. That might.
I don't think we can do that. We need that light at those dark hours for safety and building code issues. That has to be. I urge you please to look at the second bullet under small impact. It speaks directly to this project.
All right, so a limited number of lighting fixtures are planned for parking and safety lighting, but all fixtures will be fully shielded, downward directed, and no glare or light spillage on adjacent properties or roadways will result. No signs, accessory structures, or buildings will be illuminated. There's very minimal light spillage, but not no light spillage.
We have to be realistic in how we read everything. Light is light. There is ambient light created by anything. You know, there's light spillage when somebody in one of our neighbors turns a light on in the house, it spills out onto our property. There is light spillage from cars that pass by. We've set our property back, and now we have to have the floodlights. Again, we will direct them down. They will be downward facing. They will be, you know, anti-glare. They'll be fully shielded. But there's only so much we can do if we are also obligated to provide this light.
I mean, would path lights facing the building be sufficient for, you know, for safety there? Like, you know, like bollard lights that are kind of placed just in toward of the lot line that are directed towards your property?
Eric, can you speak to that?
Sure, it would impact the clearance of those, right? There's a 3-foot wide sidewalk there that to allow access back to it. So if you take up 12 inches with that ballard or what have you, you know, you're not going to have room to maneuver.
Let's look at what moderate to large impacts are.
You know, again, I think, Ron, unless the board chair or board member asks a question about legal opinion, I don't think you need to be giving it.
I would like
I'm
to
not giving Jaime, thank you, but I've never attempted to render anyone legal opinion.
Let's have it. If we have you guys, it's helpful to have you here for these questions as they come up. But let's. I would like to hear from really Jaime and Amanda in terms of leading us and advising us as we move forward on these points and questions. So, you know, I'd be curious to hear other board members. It's the way that this is worded. It says no glare or light spillage on adjacent properties. There is.
I think in this instance,
yeah.
Well, I think in this instance, it's probably, you can look at the moderate to large impact and sort of understand the scale of the difference between the two. So for moderate to large impact, it says lighting will be provided for large recreational facilities or arenas. The answer is no. Lighting will remain illuminated all night. Here the answer is no. This is just something that's going to come on when needed. Lighting will be created in a rural area where there is currently dark skies and little sky glow. The answer is no. There are no natural barriers present to screen lighting effects, and the project site is visible from adjacent land uses. You know, there are no natural barriers here, but again, there are street lights on this block. So there is quite a bit of ambient light, as the attorney mentioned a moment ago, and visibility of drivers on adjacent or nearby roads and streets may be impaired. And I think, you know, the answer here is probably pretty clearly no. The light's not going to spill. The light that's spilling onto the neighbor's yard is not going to be spilling to the front of the property. And these aren't bright lights. They're, I think, 1200 lumen lights. So.
In our comments, I mean, I wonder if, you know, if we determine that this is a small impact, that the comments would be to direct them to, you know, investigate. I don't know if this is even possible, as you know, to investigate either lowering the height of the lights, or or using a different fixture that may have a less of a diameter. I kind of pragmatically, I'm not overly concerned, but I am just looking at the actual chart that was provided to us where it shows this light spillage over the lot lines. I just want to make sure that we're kind of considering that and as we move forward. I don't want to spend, I would like to kind of come to a conclusion on this one so we can move forward.
I would see it as a small impact. And I don't know whether we can do this, but one thing would be to, potentially revisit, if this is built, then if the neighbors have a complaint over light spillage, to take another look at it. But I don't see it from the drawings. It looks really minimal to me, and it is in an area with streetlights, as Jaime has said. It's not a rural area, a dark sky area.
I think it's reasonable, Seth, to have them look at any additional ways they can mitigate. But at this point, I think you're probably right in your assessment.
I just was wondering, and I mean, this probably is not realistic, but it would some sort of screening between this building and the adjacent property help with the light leakage, or is that something? I mean, I'm not sure what that screening would be, but if it was tall enough and not objectionable to the adjacent owner, would that help?
So I can't speak for the adjacent owner. The applicant just mentioned that they need that 3-foot clearance. I think they need that because of the style of building that they're doing. So they need to have that 3-foot clearance. But I also know that the neighbor has expressed that it's pretty close to their house. They park their car there, and I would imagine that the neighbor would like to have that couple of extra inches of wiggle room in case they need to open their door and it extends onto this property as well. So I think like adding an additional barrier between the two properties, unless something that was explicitly asked for, may not be an improvement.
Right. All right. Well, I would agree with Nina in terms of there being a small impact overall.
I also agree that that it has a small impact, but I do also like the idea of being able to explore other fixtures that has an ability to tilt or angle in such a way that it could minimize or eliminate the light spillage to the adjacent property. And I think lowering the height, if possible, as well, is also a good idea as well.
May I ask just a question?
Can I comment first though, Ronald? Sorry, I just have
Of
one
course, yeah, of course you can.
So I would like to just like to say that I agree with Isabel, and I think that just looking at the light diagram and looking at these questions and the conversation, the discussion, it's been helpful. That it is a small impact, and it appears that the only spillage is occurring is on the driveway with 16 Water Street. Is that correct? Is that 16 there? So if that fixture, like Isabel suggested, they could explore a different fixture or something that, or different height. I think that would be helpful in mitigating that issue without having to go through screening and things of that nature. That's all I have to say.
I just want to end it by saying if we lower it probably by a foot or two, I think it resolves this issue. We're happy to look at the issue, but I think just bringing that down creates it not going as far. And that's a very simple solution to this. And we will certainly give you a light map with it 2 feet lower.
Thank you. I think that based on the feedback from the board that everybody agreed that there is a small impact. Eric's comments are helpful as well. I also think yes, E is also a no. We've already discussed that item as well. It's not creating a sky glow brighter than existing area conditions.
So the next one was the proposed action may have an impact on human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants. So that the question here was primarily focused on whether the construction would kick up any sort of dust, whether there were any contaminants in the soil, if it was brownfield, and that construction would come over. The phase 1, phase 2. Joe Tremelli, I don't know if you want to weigh in on your review of that.
Yeah, so looking through the phase 2 and the results, they collected 4 soil samples, 2 soil vapor samples, and one water sample, groundwater sample. On the soil samples, there were a total of, let's see. There was one soil sample that had one compound that exceeded the unrestricted soil use group per DEC, but did not exceed the residential use group. So as part of the recommendations and their findings, they suggested that, should elevated soils with elevated contaminants be encountered, that, excavation and spoils may need to be disposed of at a permanent facility. But again, it was just the one compound in one soil sample, and it while it exceeded the unrestricted soil use group, it did not exceed the residential use group. The soil vapor samples, there were 2 collected. I don't think there are any hard and fast standards or limits that are set. They're guidelines. There were 8 compounds that were detected, and they were found to be above the recommended guidance levels. But to that end, the phase 2 recommended a soil vapor barrier be implemented as part of the building construction. And Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that could be as simple as a polyethylene lining underneath the building foundation, which is something that I think it's been done before in that area, certainly on newer construction. With regard to the groundwater sample, the one sample that was collected, they did have, let's see, there were some concentrations that were, let's see, I think there was one semi-volatile that was detected above the guidelines. But again, to that end, should dewatering be needed for the project, whether or not any special provisions or collection and containment systems would be required, could be determined at that point. So, we know there's a underground storage tank that needs to be removed yet. That would obviously have to be done in compliance with any applicable rules and regulations for the DEC. We have the soil samples, the water sample, and the soil vapor analysis. So I think all in all, we know what the site presents, and there are some means and measures to mitigate and remedy during construction, both during and after construction. But it's, I don't think it, it's certainly not a brownfield. It doesn't rise to that level.
Okay, so in this instance, I think that if the board's in agreement, we can change this from yes to no. If you'd like to keep it as yes, we can go through the various different questions underneath it. So it's really your decision here.
I just have a quick question with regards to the underground storage tank. Does that require a remediation plan that's approved by DEC in terms of removing that?
Yeah, there will be as part of the removal. I see Ron shaking his head, but if you want to speak.
It's county health, Joe. It's DEC delegated to Westchester County Health Department.
Well, what's the size of that tank? Is it over?
It's,
the size of it?
It's under the regulation.
Under 1100?
It's a former residential tank. Yeah, Joe.
Okay.
I believe it's 400 and some.
Right. But, the short answer yes, there are, procedures to properly remove and decommission and dispose of an underground storage tank. And as part of that, they'll be collecting soil samples in the immediate area of the tank to make sure that the soil is not contaminated or the tank hasn't leaked. If it has, for whatever reason, the excavation continues until you find clean soils.
Yeah.
Joe, may I also note, if we do encounter, forget encountering contaminants. we are obligated, our contract will be obligated to have county health on site when we pull that tank. County health will not only inspect the excavation for visual signs of contaminants, but also, Joe, I believe, have a PID meter on site for volatiles. And they will also visually inspect the tank itself for holes or even pitting on the tank. To the extent that there's any visual or olfactory or photoionization detection limits exceeded when that tank is pulled out of the ground, we will be required in the presence of county health to call the DEC spill hotline, in which event we will have a spill case opened, and we will be then within the purview of the of DEC to do a cleanup under their regulation.
Do you all have any plan to address the soil vapor issue? Because I do see that as maybe the only potentially long-term issue here.
Yeah, as
was-
Joe noted, we do a vapor barrier based on the results of that phase 2 are expected. Of course, this is not really an EAF issue, excuse me. It's really a construction practice issue, and we are prepared to install that.
All right, I just wanted to make sure that you are actually going to install it, because it's one thing for the phase 2 to say, you know, if necessary, we will. But if the soil vapor levels are to the point where it's required, I would hope that you will definitely be installing it. And I do think that for purposes of this particular question, it's not out of the realm of reasonableness to be asking.
Fair, Amanda, and yeah, to the extent that that our readings, that DOH determines that based on our readings we require a vapor barrier, we will absolutely be installing.
I mean, going back to Jaime's question, is board members on the yes versus no based on what we've just heard. Does anybody have any kind of thoughts on that?
I would be okay with changing it to no, but subject to the point that Amanda brought up with vapor barrier. I mean, I don't think it needs to be made as a condition, but somehow gets noted on the record.
Yeah, I mean, our discussion is, this is all on the record, so.
Okay.
And they have submitted their phase 2, which is part of the record now.
Is everybody else okay? I apologize. I haven't heard from anybody with.
It's okay.
Yes, I'm agree.
Agree.
So moving on, the consistency with community plans. The proposed action is not consistent with adopted land use plans, and so it's a weird kind of way of answering the question, but it is not consistent, which is a double negative, which means that it is consistent with adopted land use plans. It's consistent with the zoning. So consistency with community character. So the question is, the proposed project is inconsistent with the existing community character. I think this is a good point to go to the workbook.
Yes.
So many people define their community's character in very general terms: suburban, rural, urban, quiet, safe, scenic, or friendly are terms often used. Others describe community character in only in terms of visual features. Community character is broader than this, however. Community character is defined by all the man-made and natural features of the area. It includes the visual characters of a town, village, or city, and its visual landscape, but also includes the buildings and structures and their uses, the natural environment, activities, town services, and local policies that are in place. These combine to create a sense of place or character that defines the area. Changes to the type and intensity of land use, housing, public services, aesthetic quality, and the balance between residential and commercial uses can all change the community character. Most proposed actions will result in some change in community character. There are probably few that will result in no change at all. Examples of actions that may not affect community character include passage of a local law that is not related to land use, or other discretionary actions that require seeker but do not result in building or development. Note that question 18 asks if the proposed project is not consistent with community character. Reviewing agencies will need to first understand what the existing community character is. Sometimes this is clearly defined as a comprehensive plan, clearly defined in a comprehensive plan. As such, reviewing agencies should be familiar with those plans. Other times, the reviewing agency will need to discuss and articulate what current community character is. Reviewing agencies should then ask and answer sub-questions A through G below in order to understand what changes the proposed project might bring to the community. A comparison of current conditions to those that might exist after implementation of the project will determine if the action is inconsistent with the existing community character or not. If the reviewing agency decides that the action is consistent with community character, then check no to this question and move on to part 3. However, if you find the proposed action is not consistent with existing community character, then answer sub-questions A through G to evaluate the size of potential impacts resulting from that inconsistency.
So, I mean, this goes back to the conversation we had on Thursday, which is kind of how are we defining that community? And, you know, it was helpful for me to read this because it was also a little confusing because there's already a question on kind of, is it consistent with applicable? You know, one of the prior questions was looking at applicable, you know, zoning and code and land use, which obviously this is. It's, you know, kind of as of right with most zoning regulations. And it's also, I think we've discussed here, consistent with, you know, our village does have a very recently adopted comprehensive plan. And I think this project is very clearly consistent with that comprehensive plan, which is something we've discussed here before. I think that you know, there certainly have been public comments regarding, you know, what this building will look like and how it will fit in amongst, you know, the houses that are on that road, that are on Water Street, on that section of Water Street. But at the same time, you know, there are, you know, in that portion of the village, there are all sorts of different, you know, structural, you know, building typologies, building sizes, architectural styles. And so, you know, I struggle with it a little bit, but you know, kind of looking at the overall question, and board members, you can absolutely kind of disagree with me or feel like it's important to go through the sub questions. But I think looking at the overall definition of this, we have a comprehensive plan, the building kind of fits. And I did kind of go through all the sub questions on my own, and I kind of came to the conclusion that this was, you know, this was consistent, but I want to hear from other folks on that.
Yeah, so the sub questions here, and I'm just going to shoot them out real fast, so you can consider them all. We don't have to check them, but the proposed action may replace or eliminate existing facilities, structures, or areas of historic importance to the community. The proposed action may create a demand for additional community services, such as police, fire, and schools. The proposed action may displace affordable or low-income housing in an area where there's a shortage of such housing. The proposed action may interfere with the use or enjoyment of officially recognized or designated public resources. The action is inconsistent with the predominant architectural scale and character, and the proposed action is inconsistent with the character of the existing natural landscape. Those are all considerations. Obviously, if you feel like you want to answer these individually, you can, but if you think the answers are all going to be no, then you would go to no. So, you know, I want to be mindful of time here. Amanda,
yeah,
you know, she spoke. So this is, I would recommend, Seth, that maybe this is the last question for today to deal with this.
Absolutely. This is the one that I wanted to get to because we were kind of scratching our heads on this one last go around.
Yeah. I just want to jump in really quickly because I too struggled with this, and I think, and I'm not sure where I found this, but in reviewing this in the handbook, what's, you know, I did struggle with sort of the strikingly different, you know, on its own, the characteristic of the project is very interesting and exciting, but within the context of the neighborhood. And I think the sentence that sort of led me to the small, or not no, but a small impact as opposed to anything else, was that the visual character is changed, but generally consistent, which goes to your point, Seth, about the variety of other architectural styles, if you will, in the area. But in terms of the immediately adjacent properties, I really did struggle with sort of the aesthetics and the community character consistency, but feel like it is a small impact.
Yeah, I want to just sort of back up what Michael is saying, because if you walk up the street from this project, there are bigger buildings. You walk down the street, there are bigger buildings. It's just that it is sitting smack between two of the smaller single-family homes, which makes it, you know, precisely why I think a number of us were struggling with this. But if you look at the character of that area overall, then I think it's smaller little, you know, smaller, no impact, because it is such a gloriously mixed neighborhood. It's one of the things I really like about it is how many different styles and types of buildings and uses there are down here.
Hi, this is Isabel. I would also agree with Nina and Michael that I think the impact is, you know, no to very minimal. It's pretty consistent within the parameters of, you know, the neighborhood. So
I think that, you know, and we can hear from more board members if you have any thoughts. I think the idea of checking yes, because we are acknowledging that there is some difference here. You know, to me, I think, you know, Michael pointed out the one question, which is the question E, which is the kind of the biggest one, or the really, to me, the only one that had any salience in our conversation. And while there will be some, you know, impact, which we have to acknowledge, we've heard that from a lot of folks, it would be small.
All right, so I'm checking based off of that comment. I'm checking yes here, and I'm gonna just go through these questions really fast for the ones we know. Proposed action may eliminate existing facility structures or areas of historic importance to the community. I think that safe to say no there. Proposed action may create a demand for additional community services. That's a no. The proposed action may displace affordable or low-income housing in an area where there's a shortage of such housing. This is a, you know, it's a 3 units of housing and on a vacant lot.
Well, it's not
displacing anything.
It's not displacing, yeah.
Yeah, it's not displacing anybody. Yeah. So the proposed action may interfere with the use or enjoyment of officially recognized or designated public resources. I think that we've covered that in other sections, that it's a no there. The proposed action is inconsistent with the predominant architectural scale and character. And that's the question that I think y'all are sort of at right now. And it sounds like everyone's saying still the answer is no, if only because there is no predominant architectural style there, and it is in the same scale as the existing project, as the, you know, sort of the different uses in the area.
Correct.
Agreed.
That's how I feel.
All right, so then that's a no. The proposed action is inconsistent with the character of the existing natural landscape.
It's a no.
It's a no. Okay, so that's everything in terms of the EAF. So we have enough now that me and Amanda can work on the. And I think Amanda's going to draft up the neg deck, and we'll work on the part 3, and then we'll have those back to you in a couple of weeks.
All right.
Thank you for undergoing that really thoughtful process. That was important.
Thank you.
It was actually helpful to go through all that. Well, it did take up a good chunk of this meeting, but yeah, no, I agreed that was important. Okay, so let's so you know, I think that we've say thank you to the presenters for your help in answering us questions, and let's move on to our next agenda item.
Thank you, guys. I know it was long, but thank you.
Thank you all very much for your time. Appreciate it.
All right. Are we up to 173, 175?
Yes,
North
we
Highland.
are. So
Okay.
we have not. So we've received some items, revisions to the application. We did not receive those by the revision deadline. In fact, we just got them recently. So they're not matters that we can really discuss today because we didn't get them in time to get them out to everybody. They need to go to the EAC. They still haven't provided the full detail that we're looking for. We've asked them to provide a cover memo with their updated changes. I think that there are still some changes that need to be made to the SWIP, and there's some detail that they need to provide in terms of referrals to the ZBA potentially. As the plans are drawn right now, it's not clear whether or not they're going to need a variance, but it looks like they very well may need a variance due to the location of some of the drive aisles on the furniture store. So we're still kind of trying to get clarity on that. And I want to give Keller the opportunity to talk a little bit about sort of the missing pieces that are here for the SWIP.
Yeah, well, we don't have a SWIP. The whole thing's missing. So we just have a drainage map that was submitted today, but there's no, the SWIP has not been prepared yet that I'm aware of.
Yeah. All we've been presented with is an old SWIP. So because of the fact that we haven't gotten proper information in proper time, we're asking this matter be adjourned.
Does everyone on the board agree that we should be adjourning this until we have further information and staff is satisfied that we can move this forward?
Agreed.
Agreed.
All right. So without any objections, we'll adjourn this matter until we have further information. Okay, so we have next up on the list is another adjournment, right? That's the Water Street and Central Avenue. So that's adjourned. And then we have 70 Croton Avenue, 70A Croton Avenue. Jaime?
Yeah, so we have an updated referral letter from the building inspector. So the applicant has provided quite a bit of extra information. They've been working with us to try to get all this information. There's a couple of pieces of note. They, obviously they came through this process, acknowledged not the way that they're supposed to. They did construction on the project without proper approvals due to the changes they made. They've tried to get all their stuff in order. They've expressed, the attorney for the applicant has expressed concern about trying to move forward with the process as diligently as possible. And so they, in that effort, they've tried to give us everything that they can as quickly as possible. We got some extra information today. I don't think it's any information that's really relevant to the discussion today. The key thing for them is they need to get forwarded over to the ZBA. And so we, in evaluating their items, the building inspector, Keller Sessions, Amanda, and myself, in consultation with the Corporation Counsel, thought it made sense to refer over 4 variances. We're not sure whether they're going to need all 4, whether they would just need 3. But doing this out of an abundance of caution for the applicant so that they can just go ahead and move forward with the noticing of everything, make sure that they get on the ZBA agenda, and that in the event that they only need 3 variances, obviously, then they would only have to go forward with those 3. So the applicant provided all their information to us to get on the ZBA agenda. The ZBA agenda was posted to the newspaper today. So it's not actually going to come out, but because of the way that timing works, it was already given to the newspaper today so that the referral could take place tonight and it would end up in the newspaper in a couple of days. So that's where we are with that. I don't think that there's a lot for the applicant to talk about really today.
Okay.
Make the changes to the BAR that were requested. In the last meeting, you asked to see some changes to the facade that would show the sort of the undulation of the property rather than a solid cornice around the top. They didn't make those changes to the BAR, but since all you really need to do today is refer it, I think it's okay to move forward with refer it. If you'd like to bring the applicant in for a minute, you can do that, but I don't think there's much to discuss.
Okay, so I mean, can you just specifically what are the 4 referrals that we're talking about?
Yeah, let me pull up the referral letter. So this is the referral letter. This is the most recent one came in. So it's going to require an area variance for rear yard setback, area variance for side yard setback, a variance for maximum building coverage percentage, and a variance for the minimum parking aisle width as 24 feet. The parking width, the one that's in question here about the parking width is because that when Keller Sessions was doing the review, they scaled the drawings, and the drawings showed that the parking width wasn't wide enough, although the notation stated that it was. Joe went out and checked. Joe Agasinelli, the building inspector, went out and field checked it and said that there, the drive aisle entering into the building was, I think, was like 24 feet and 10 inches, and it only needed to be 24 feet. There are no finishes on it yet, so we don't know if that's going to shrink, but he felt like it was probably big enough to accommodate everything. But because we still have some, back and forth discussion that we need to have with the applicant on this, we thought it was best to keep it in as a variance out of an abundance of caution.
Okay, and we've looked at these plans, and just as by kind of point of reminder, these variances are because of what they had already built, and this parking structure, which was a parking lot and became a part of the building, and effectively these variances are required because of that parking lot becoming part of the building.
Right.
Any board members, do we have any questions for the applicant that we would want to bring them in before we want to ask the applicant before we make these referrals?
I not really ask a question, but didn't we also ask for an amended site plan showing the patio, the side elevations and the site plan? Did we get that as well, or will we get that?
We've not gotten that yet, no. We have gotten amended site plans showing the building larger. We've gotten some updates to the information that we did ask for. So they gave us everything we needed to be able to do the variance referrals.
Yeah, I don't want to hold up the variance. I mean, I definitely want to move forward.
I don't think that we got everything we needed by way of the BAR. They received all those comments before. They may have just been focusing on trying to, get the variance moving. I think, if there are any comments you want to make to the applicant here, it'd be helpful. I'll take note of them as well to make sure we do a follow-up, but
Yeah, no, I just more wanted to sort of note that we were still waiting for that, but I'd be happy to move forward with referring the variances, referring out to the ZBA for the variances.
Yep, and I don't have any additional questions. The only thing I had been thinking about was exactly what Michael just covered, so.
Yeah, to be clear, what you're talking about is the full length elevations that we asked for. So they submitted elevation, but again, it was just the main structure and not including sort of the back patio parking lot side of the structure. So they still haven't provided that information. They did provide a grading plan, which provides some of that information, but not the elevation on the side. So we'll ask them for full length elevations that integrate the grading plan as designed.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else on the board have any questions on this?
No.
No questions.
Okay, I mean, effectively what we're discussing now would, and I don't know if this is, Amanda, technically correct, but we would be adjourning the BAR item because we don't have enough information to discuss BAR, and then moving forward on the referrals for the zoning board.
Yeah, you can just take a motion to refer to the ZBA. I don't think you need to, take any formal action on this, on the planning board or BAR items. You can just move on the ZBA referral.
Okay. All right. So at this point, if there are no other questions from the board, and I think we've reviewed this project for a few weeks now. Are there a few sessions? We have a motion, excuse me, to forward the variances to the zoning board as described just a moment ago by Jaime.
I'm sorry.
Michael Aronson.
No, yeah.
Are you waiting?
I use your name. I referred to you.
Oh, wait. Were you waiting?
You want me to read them off? I apologize.
No. You already did. You referred to them.
Motion
just
to refer to the ZBA for the 4 variances as previously outlined.
Bobby Bowker, I second that motion.
Roll call.
All right, Seth Roy,
Aye.
Michael Aronson,
Aye.
Nina Aaron,
Aye.
Bobby Bowker,
Aye.
Eric Talbot,
Eric, you're on mute.
Sorry, aye.
and Isabel Nugent.
Aye.
That's 6-0 in favor.
All right, very good. Okay, so with that, I think we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is 136, 138, and 140 Croton Avenue. So Jaime, can you give us the update here?
Yeah, so the applicant's here today. So after the last meeting, they made some revisions to the project. I'm gonna pull up the plan real quick to show you. But, one of the concerns that was expressed about, not a concern, but, the form-based code requires that you do, you use the build to line. And so the build to line is in a place that's not consistent with the NC2 zoning. So the big change, I think, for this property as it pertains to this project is that the NC2 zone requires that there's commercial activity on the bottom floor, and not residential. So you can't have residential on the bottom floor. And in the form-based code, you can't have residential. That's the big benefit to this. And obviously that's a big part of this project, is being able to have the residential as a primary use on the bottom floor, principal use on the bottom floor. And so they're doing everything they can to conform with the form-based code. We know that they're going to need some additional variances beyond what we're normally used to looking at. So that, normal variances are bulk height, parking, setback requirements, which I think, everyone here is pretty familiar with. Some of the other ones that they're looking for a little more clarity on are things like garage doors, stuff of that nature. Those are things that are specific to the form-based code, as well as the build to line, rather than a specific setback line. They're not meeting the build to line in one of the corners. So we're still kind of trying to finalize that. We have a preliminary draft of the variances. I think the applicant has pointed out pretty well what they believe are the variances. BFJ has given us a good memo that's a start. But we want to make sure that we get this right. And so the building inspector is taking some extra time to go over. We're going to make sure that we get a referral letter out sometime soon. We're going to go over it with the applicant. The applicant has expressed that there may be some disagreement over whether or not certain things require a variance. So we're going to get to that process. So the goal, I think, coming into this meeting, we're hoping that you'd be able to refer it out to the zoning board. We're not ready on our end to give you something to refer out to the zoning board. However, as the zoning board chair, you can sort of sign off on that referral. So the expectation is for the next meeting, they're not going to make it as a noticed meeting for the zoning board, but they're probably going to go and start a presentation. And at that point, they will have identified what those variances are that are needed. And so, that'll kind of keep the process rolling. And by the next meeting, we can have a more robust discussion and hopefully start the public hearing stage of the process for this project. There is one item that you need to do today, and that's declare lead agency for the environmental review. And I think it would be helpful if you allowed the applicant to talk for, just a very short amount of time to talk about some of the changes that they've made to the project.
Makes sense. So now's now a good time. Do we bring, are they the applicants in? And
they're here, yeah.
All right, let's do it.
So we had more of the applicants before. We have Jacqueline Tyler and John Fry here. It looks like we have lost Joe Apicella.
Sorry, guys. All right, so just before you guys start, so as Jaime noted, we're going to try to focus this on the changes. I know we've spent a lot of time both at our last session as well as during our work session looking at what you guys have presented. So if you can I'll put a timer on here, try to stick to about 8 minutes on this.
Or less. I would suggest Jaime provided a concise, lucid, and accurate summary.
We're going to do it in less than 2.
That's even better. That's great. Go for it.
Can I share screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so yes, Jaime, thank you for the overview. That was pretty much exactly where we were headed. So that cut our presentation down. So we appreciate that. As Jaime mentioned, I know that originally the concerns, this was our presentation back in September. And I know that the northeast corner was a concern to the board and to the planning department, as well as looking at the build to line. So what you'll see on our recent submission is we have included the build to line, which you'll see here in red, based on the 10-foot setback from the property line. And you'll also see the property line and the 15-foot required setback from the sidewalk edge, right? So those are differing. So what you'll see is on the northeast corner, there's actually a smaller distance between the property line, which is noted in blue, and the existing sidewalk. And as you travel to the west side, you'll see that increases substantially between our property line and the curbside. So what we did to accommodate the northeast corner, we were able to pull that building back. We kept it within the build to zone. But in order to keep pretty much the consistency as you travel west, we are outside of the build to zone, as Jaime mentioned earlier in his summary. So we will be asking for a variance for this corner only. We've been able to achieve and eliminate both of the variances that were going to be required in this northeast corner. In doing so, we also, I spoke with Jaime today, we're continuing to look at the height along this corner here. I know that that was raised as some concern. So we did take the comments that we received in the memo the other day, and we're continuing to explore how we can step that back further and further away from the corner edge in order for there to be a lesser impact at that northwest corner here. We have increased our parking from last time. So we are now above a 1-to-1 ratio. Before we were falling just under that, but we are at the 1-to-1 ratio currently. I know that the board asked last time for some comparisons with the photos. We were able to put into the submission this last time. We were able to look at from the residential side. We do have updates with the other side. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to show them or not. So we're continuing to address all of the comments that we've heard from both the board as well as the memos that we've received.
Great, thank you. Board members, do you have questions for the applicant?
So you can, if you have submitted the materials to this and they're available on our agenda, there's no vote that's being taken today. So if they were submitted and they're on our agenda, then you can show them, I believe. So,
no, the other two views are not on the agenda. They're the views from Croton Avenue. I believe Michael asked about them I think it was Michael asked the last time.
I'm not sure. Amanda, maybe you can help navigate that question because I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, I missed that question.
So they have a couple of other views that they've done but haven't been placed on the agenda. I think either you just submitted them or you haven't submitted them yet. And so they're not on the agenda, they're not available. There's no vote today, obviously, on this matter. So are they able to present those here?
Well, I mean, it's technically not in compliance with either our policies or the new open meetings law, but the new open meetings law doesn't go into effect until November 18th. So it's really up to you, if you want to make an exception here, but you're not going to be making any final decisions on this application tonight. So if you want to wait and see those at the next meeting when they can submit them with plenty of time, you could also do that.
As anxious as I am to see them, I think I would like to kind of stick with the book and we'll take a look at those when they're officially submitted.
We do have these renderings, but like I said, we will have the same photorealistic renderings available tomorrow if you would like them.
That's great. Okay, so that's helpful. I don't know what other questions or comments we have. I know we'll have some time. I think once these are posted and up for the next agenda, we can look into those and have a maybe more of a further kind of BAR type conversation, which is what these are hinting at. But I don't know, any other questions, from the board members? I guess we can't do any referrals. We're still waiting on the kind of the final determination on that. But while we have the applicant here.
So I'm sorry so we're not going to be able to refer to ZBA today? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so you're not going to be able to refer to ZBA today. You don't need to refer to ZBA today. Either way, they're not going to be able to get to the ZBA in time for noticing requirements. So it's not really a necessary thing for them. They're still going to be able to make it to the ZBA meeting as an informal presentation, we expect, so that's fine. You have 5 more applications after this tonight, and you do have 1 remaining item to complete for this, which is to declare lead agency.
I would urge us to move on. Declaring ourselves as lead agency.
I think shall I take that as a motion? Would anyone like to make a motion to declare lead agency?
Michael Aronson
Super.
motion to declare the board lead agency for environmental purposes.
Nina Aaron second that motion.
All right, and a roll call.
All right, Seth Roy,
Aye.
Michael Aronson,
Aye.
Nina Aaron,
Aye.
Bobby Bowker,
Aye.
Eric Talbot,
Aye.
and Isabel Newen.
Aye.
That motion passes 6-0.
Excellent. All right, so that's great. Thank you guys.
Thank you,
for your
everybody.
time
Have
and
a
for your
great
patience
evening.
tonight.
Yes, good luck with the rest of your agenda.
Yeah, thanks. All right. All right. So I think, was that the last?
That's the last full business.
That was the last. Yeah. Yeah. So now we're up to new business. So I think actually in the first item on the new business agenda is an adjournment, right? That's 29 Birch. So that's adjourned. So then that would make 45 Terrace the next project up. Jaime, you want to go over that one?
Yeah, so let me pull up the agenda here for 45 Terrace. I am going to skip right up to the memo from Keller Sessions. So the project is essentially this property owner has a existing railroad tie wall. The railroad tie wall needed to be checked to see if it was close to any wetlands. Or not the railroad tie wall, they're replacing the railroad tie wall with a kind of a concrete block wall. There were a few comments from Keller Sessions about this. Since Keller Sessions is here, I think maybe it makes sense to just have them provide those comments. I don't think there's any major stuff here, but I'll hand it over to Joe.
No, it was all very minor. Let me see if I could just get my memo in front of me here. Just some minor details to be put on the plan, being that this is a excavation and fill permit. We would like to see a cut and fill volume calculation added to the plan. Some existing proposed topography would help to understand the overall height of the wall. Just opening up my memo here. Give me 1 second. We did note that the application, I think it indicated the need to go to the EAC, but it's obviously not west of Route 9. I think that was just an error on the part of the application, so that's not required. Similarly, I believe they indicated that it was in the floodplain. The property is not. We checked that with the flood maps. So again, floodplain development permit would not be required.
Wetlands permit?
They don't need a wetland permit either. They, they're beyond the buffer, the 100-foot buffer of the. Actually, I think it's a 50-foot buffer. There's a water course down below, but they're well beyond it. So it was really just some details. The construction details for the wall were missing some dimensions. We thought with regard to drainage layers and filtered fabric and geogrid reinforcement. So, all in all, very minor comments, but, nonetheless, some information that we thought needed to be added to the plan.
Is the applicant here, Jaime?
Yeah, the applicant is here. It's David Antonini, I believe.
Just one last thought, if the board was amenable, we don't see why these couldn't be handled as conditions of any kind of approval if the board saw it fit.
Thanks for that clarification, Joe.
That's just like all of our other ENF permits, you should consider that this will need a bond associated with it.
Thank you. Okay, so, all right, we have David Antonini here. Is this a homeowner or architect or?
I'm not sure, actually. This is, apologies, let me just pull up my stuff here. So David Antonini, the applicant. Mr. Antonini, if you could take yourself off of mute.
And Jaime, if maybe you could put up the drawings.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yes, thank you. So if you can just, just briefly describe your project and,
Well, what my plans of doing is to remove what I want to do is excavate the dirt behind the railroad tie wall and remove the old wall and put a bed of gravel, and the wall that I'm using is the Cambridge stone wall, and Gypsy, stop it. And there's a the way it's going to work is the wall is there's going to be a bed of gravel, and the wall is hollow in the back, so the wall is going to be filled with gravel, and whatever water that goes, it's going to drain through the wall, through the bottom of the wall.
Got it. How tall is the wall? About?
Excuse me?
Do you know how tall the wall is?
Yeah, it's going to be about 4'6" to 5 foot.
Okay. And I'm just looking at the plan here. So it's kind of that entire kind of section described there, kind of it rides along an angle. I don't know if I can highlight this. I don't know that.
Yeah, the original wall is not a straight wall. I'm going to make it a straight wall.
Okay.
Do you know how to use the annotation feature?
I should, but I don't think I do. No.
All right, so if you go under your little panel where it has like mute, stop video, everything else, you'll see next to the pause share or the share button, there's a annotate.
Yeah, not on mine.
Oh,
it's all right.
All right, so you're talking about this area here, right?
Yeah. So what's being straightened out, I guess, is what I was just trying to clarify. Everybody's
just joining in on the annotating now, huh? Mr. Antonini, did you hear that question?
No, I did not. I'm sorry.
I was just trying to clarify where you said that you're straightening the wall out a little bit. I just want for the record and for our clarity, what's the change? What's being straightened out from the railroad ties that you have now?
Well, the railroad tie wall, it isn't a straight wall. If you see on the print, it is actually like zigzagged a little bit, and it's just going to be totally straight.
Okay, so are you squaring off that corner there entirely?
Yes, and it's going to be further back into my property more.
Got it. All right,
and as I'm building the wall, there is a fabric that you lay down to actually hold the wall back. You lay that in the ground, and then you put your fill on top of the wall. That's why I have to remove a little more fill than expected.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to orient myself on your plan here, but this is just to to kind of hold back your front yard from the street, right?
That's correct. It's in very disarray shape right now. It's in very bad shape.
Board members, any questions on this?
No, it seems pretty straightforward to me. No questions as of yet.
On the issue of bond, you know, do we know what the cost of this work is?
More just the material. The material is going to be about $5,000.
Thank you, Lord.
Who's doing the labor? Are you doing the labor, Dave?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we discussed this on a recent excavation and fill permit where, I think it was a DIY as well.
Yeah, we price it on a linear feet, right?
Right.
Yeah.
How many linear feet of wall are we putting in, Dave?
I have the, excuse me, I just have to get the plans.
Okay.
I mean, pulling up a street view.
Yep.
The linear feet is 43, 12, 43, 53, 43, 53, 63, 73, about 93 linear foot.
Got it.
I don't know if we have records of the number that we used last go around, somewhere in the $1,000 a fout installed. I mean, these are all different heights.
I thought it was.
so-
$200 a foot, maybe, right? Does that?
Yeah, I
sound-
think it was
Yeah,
two.
sorry.
300 bucks. Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like,
Sorry, guys.
$300.
Pricing parapet walls this morning. They're true.
$200 would be 18,600 plus 5,000 for the materials, 23,600.
Yeah, I think Isabel was able to help a lot here with the as well.
Sorry, how many linear, 93?
Well, I have to, let me get a, hold on, it's 43 foot, 12 foot, and then it's going to be 26 foot.
54.
81.
Yeah. So 81 feet.
Is this the property in question that we're looking at right here?
Yeah.
That's correct.
It's kind of it's like sort of the end of the block, and then there's a block that wraps around it. So you can see this is the start of the wood wall, the little wood railroad tie wall, but it continues down this way and cuts back that way.
Right.
You can't really see it.
Most of the wall is fairly low. It's only going to be about 2-3 foot, and then there's only a small corner that's going to be the 5 foot, the 4.5, 5 foot. It's only just a little piece of the corner on the end. Most of it is very low.
Yeah, the last wall we were discussing at $200 a foot. We were looking at a 5 foot high wall. I mean, this on average, that was at 200. I don't know if we want to kind of split the difference and call it, bring it down to 150.
Yeah, there's definitely less labor involved in this one.
Yeah.
But that other
Yeah,
site was obviously very difficult.
Yeah, because in some spots it's only going to be about 1.5 foot, 2 foot.
So if it's 80 feet at 150, that's 12,000 plus the
12,000,
yeah, which I think that sounds more realistic for what we're discussing here. 12,000, but then that plus the 5,000 material, or did we include the material in that last?
The 5,000 I did I went up to Mason Supply and got a price. This was in the beginning of the year. I don't know what it is now, but it was about 5,000 in material, 4 and change.
Oh, we included the material in the unit price on the other
The unit
project.
cost. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the cost of the job. You need materials. Got to include it.
So then that would be, and just kind of sniff test 12,000 all in. for that work sounds about right.
That sounds pretty much about fair, 12,000.
Okay, so we're in agreement that the bond would be 12,000.
I thought we add in the materials, no?
It would be 17 with the materials.
Yeah.
I think the last time Isabel had chimed in that you should remember contractor overhead and profit if you're doing a bond. Is that correct, Isabel? I mean, I think it's not a bad thing.
No, you're right, but I think as the owner was mentioning that we're not, correct me if I'm wrong, we're not building a full 4.5 feet. There are some parts will be a little bit lower. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So
Go ahead.
yeah, if we did 12,000, I think that would be fair. It's, your plus and minus, well, it'll probably be right around there. But I think the one thing that I don't recall was that 12,000, when we did the linear footage, did we include the labor in it? That's the only thing I had to,
Yeah, you did. So
I did.
last time, I think they had a price of materials that was, I don't know, $5,000-$10,000 materials, and then there was the linear feet of labor. And I think that you added an additional bit of money for like silt fencing and sort of environmental.
Yeah, that was on a slope. It was in the back. It was actually, in terms of logistics of doing that work, that was a lot more challenging and difficult. This is kind of right here. They can do the staging right here at the corner and do the digging, and it's kind of minimal. So I think really 12,000 should be fair.
I think it sounds reasonable. It sounds consistent with what we've asked other applicants to do. I think that makes sense. And I think this photo is also helpful just in terms of, evaluating the impact on neighbors. This is, it's replacing the existing wall. It's going to make an existing wall better, and it's not really visible. Even if it was visible, I think it's nicer materials than what's there now.
Yeah, so I just need you all to make sure that this any change of grade will not create excessive drainage or erosion conditions, and this will not impair the values of adjoining properties. That's basically what you need to find for purposes of the excavation and fill.
Yep, I look at this as a replacement, so there really shouldn't be any change.
And just looking at the picture here, there's no issue with that fire hydrant.
No, I'm going to be nowhere near the fire hydrant.
Okay.
So the wall will be at the corner of the driveway. The wall's not moving, right? It'll be exactly what you're seeing, just with stone.
Yeah,
Yes, actually,
wondered how
that
deep
corner
it
is
had
going to
to
be
go.
up higher into my property even more.
Okay. It'll be, when we say up higher, it'll be closer to your house.
Closer to my house, correct.
I think, I think that this checks all of the boxes, as Amanda just noted. I think, we've determined a good bond number. I'm satisfied that we can have enough information provided that Joe's conditions are met, that this is acceptable. Anybody else?
There's also just standard conditions in the code. They need to, provide a clean fill certificate, et cetera, but those are always required. You don't need to, I'm just being repetitive.
Oh, fair enough. It's important. Any other comments on this before we move forward? All right. So if no other comments, can we have a motion to approve the application with the noted conditions and the bond of $12,000?
Eric Talbot, I make the motion to approve the permit with the noted conditions and bond of $12,000.
Bobby Bowker, I second that motion as well.
And a roll call.
Beth Roy,
Aye.
Michael Aronson,
Aye.
Nina Aaron,
Aye.
Bobby Bowker,
Aye.
Eric Talbot,
Aye.
and Isabel Nguyen.
Aye.
6-0 in favor.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Mr. Antonini.
I do have a quick question for you. How do I achieve a bond? I never done that. I really don't know how do I do that?
how can staff work with him on that point?
Yeah, so if you want to reach out to the planning department, we'll help you work on that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great.
All right, thanks, guys. All right, so moving on, our next item is 4 State Street. Jaime, you want to give us the overview here?
Yeah, so the 4 State Street is, it's right now, it's kind of a abandoned 2-family house, or sort of the shell of a 2-family house. The interior of the house is more or less totally destroyed. So the proposal is for the applicant to come in. What they're going to do is they're going to convert the property from its now sort of defunct use of a 2-family to a bar, tavern, restaurant. The bar, tavern, restaurant requires site plan approval for the property. It requires Board of Architectural Review for the proposed changes to the exterior of the building, including the construction of a large deck. It requires a conditional use permit for the proposed bar, tavern use in the PWB district. It doesn't provide any parking on site. It's kind of a quirk here of the PWB district. As everybody here is familiar, there is a waiver available to properties that are in the VC district and properties that are in the SPN district. There, however, is no waiver available to properties in the PWB district, despite the fact that they're literally across the street from properties that are eligible for that. So this property will require an area variance. We've not received sufficient information to make a determination of what all of the area variances are that they're going to need, because we need some of the interior information to determine the parking calculations that they'd have to meet for that. But we do know that they need a parking variance. It's because of the nature of the project, it is west of the Highland Avenue, but it is a type 2 project. So it doesn't require referral to the LWRP. It doesn't require a referral to, it doesn't require like a seeker review at this point. It's just type 2. So that from that standpoint, it's really just looking at those pieces, the site plan approval, BAR approval, conditional use approval. And for tonight, it'd be helpful to speak with the applicant a little bit about the project. I think for a limited amount of time. And I think that you do have enough information to refer it for a variance for the parking requirement, while asking the applicant to provide final numbers on the number of spaces that they need a variance from.
Okay, makes sense. Do we have the applicant here?
We do. So it's Peter Chernoff, and we have JB Hernandez as well. Peter, JB, you are here.
I'm trying to get on. Am I on?
You're on.
We can
Not
hear you.
on. I can't see myself.
Good evening.
Okay.
All right. So if you guys can give us a 5-minute kind of greatest hits of what you're proposing, so that we can start this conversation, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jaime did a pretty good job of introducing it. I mean, it's a dilapidated house on State Street. It was a 2-family. We're looking to actually do something really more in line with the zoning, because it is commercially zoned. It's not really zoned for housing. It does lie outside of the village center in terms of zoning, but it's essentially on Main Street. I mean, you've got this house and then you've got a little village owned piece next to it. So, what we're hoping to do is add something to the village center, which I think is sorely needed. The outdoor space should be good. It's on one hand an attractive use. On the other hand, who knows what's going to happen with COVID waxing and waning for the next 5 to 10 years. So it definitely, is necessary for the viability of the project. I mean, if you look at what it's like when you walk up from the waterfront right now, you know, you walk through some dismal stuff. Having some life here as you turn that corner, I think would really feel like you've arrived at something as you hit the village center of Ossining. I've heard a lot of people talk about the need for such a thing. I'd like to bring it to Ossining. In terms of the parking need, I think I think we're pretty clear on what our square footages are. So I'm a little bit taken aback that we haven't arrived at.
Can you hear me? Or?
No, we can hear you.
Yeah, if I can just walk you through the project. And yes, we have determined.
So before if I can just jump in here real quick, I just want to make sure that, you know, we're cognizant of time here, and with the understanding that we do know that they need a parking variance. I think that there's some sort of technical questions that are the way that it was sent to the building inspector was requesting a waiver instead of requesting a variance, which is why the memo, the referral letter, refers to details as yet to come. It's not necessarily that we don't know it, it's just that it was submitted incorrectly. But we do know that they need a parking variance, but we haven't had enough time to correspond back and forth with them.
Oh,
And
I thought you were saying that we hadn't stated the number.
no,
my mistake.
it's more of a technical disagreement here. So it's not a big issue. The only reason I'm saying this is because the zoning board needs to make their decision. And so I think that rather than spending too much time talking about details of this project, I think that it might be best to sort of refer it out to the zoning board at this point and come back another night.
I tend to agree, because if the zoning board, you know, shoots us down on parking, there's nothing more to talk about, sadly.
So if I can take a minute, then yeah, we do need 15 parking spaces. As you can tell, this is a very small property. There is 2 retaining walls surrounding the property. The rear, the existing rear is kind of moderate. There's not much of a slope. We're trying to do a restaurant with a kitchen in the lower level, in the basement, and then a minor kitchen on the main floor. And we'll have a 2-story, we will convert the bar area into a 2-story area with a seating area. And then on the second floor, we're gonna have an upper deck, we're gonna have a lounge area, and there's an area that's gonna be open to below, of course. We are keeping the same house as, you know, as it is. We should replace the siding, the roofing. We will work, we got a comment from Caroline Sessions. We will work on making sure that the existing fireplace, we keep it interior, so there is no issue as to being outside the property. We do show the sign that we request, which may require a variance as well. And that's very much not essential what we're trying to do with the project.
Right, thanks for the summary. No, but I think it's clear in terms of the massing and what we're looking at there. So, I mean, as tonight, I guess, you know, Amanda Jaime, is it pertinent to open up the public hearing on this project this evening if we're going to be making referrals ZBA? It's not something we need to do until because we're not taking any actions on it.
I don't think you need to open the public hearing tonight.
Okay.
I would note that I just want to mention for the public that's listening, there was submission of a letter from an attorney representing a neighbor that was in opposition to this project. So I don't want them, if they're here listening, I don't want them thinking that they're not going to get the opportunity to speak. It's just that the public hearing will start at a later meeting after they've gone to the zoning board first.
Right. We would not be taking any actions on this application other than just to send it over to the zoning board, which would determine honestly whether we would see it again, depending on the zoning board's determination.
Are we able to receive that letter, Jaime?
Of course, yeah. Yeah, it's going to be posted to the agenda.
Okay.
So it'll be available to the entire public. We just got it today.
And I just want to offer any board members, if you have any questions on this before we move forward with the referral. All right, I don't see any questions from the board. So I think kind of given where this is, it's helpful to see it. But let's get the zoning board involved with the parking issue. So can I have a motion to refer this to the zoning board for the parking variance?
Bobby,
Michael, oh, go ahead, Bob.
motion to refer to the zoning board for the parking variance?
Michael Aronson, second.
And a roll call.
Beth Roy,
Aye.
Michael Aronson,
Aye.
Nina Aaron,
Aye.
Bobby Bowker,
Aye.
Eric Talbot,
Aye.
and Isabel Nguyen.
Aye.
Do we need to declare, or does your board declare lead agency? No.
No.
The type 2. We've determined it's a type 2.
Okay, good.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. And I think we can move on to the next item on our agenda. Which is.
So the next item, so I'm going to ask that Peter and JB allow me to give my presentation again. They're the next matter.
Got it.
The next item is 31 Croton Avenue. The applicant is seeking a site plan approval and parking waiver to convert a mixed-use building into a fully residential building. At this time, we're asking the board. This application is a little different. There are some particular details that we need to get some more information on. It's in the VC district, sort of the part of Croton Avenue that's still the VC district. And so the applicant is proposing to bring forward this application under the new form-based code. Obviously, the form-based code has a lot of different criteria to it in order to adhere to it. It's brand new code. We need extra assistance from BFJ to help review this application. So we're asking that the planning board give us some time to do that and kind of kick it back to BFJ to do that. There's another particular interesting fact about this. This building has for many years used a parking lot across the street. We've asked the applicant for a title report for that parking lot across the street to make sure that there are no restrictive covenants or anything tying the use of that parking lot to this building, so that we can just clear that up.
First to be hearing anything about a title report, but I mean, I got one when I bought the property. I just bought it in October last, so about a year ago.
So if you want to provide the village that so that we can review,
Sure.
that would be helpful.
Sure.
And also we did a FOIL and there is no, I understand that there is no site plan approval for the property. So at no point has this property had received any site plan approval based on the record.
I can check with the building inspector. I know that the building inspector was still asking questions about this today. That's kind of why we did put this on the agenda originally, but we're asking for, because of the form-based code, rather than starting any in-depth discussion on this today, we'd like to get this over to BFJ and get approval to take this to BFJ and have us look at it and come back next month.
I think that makes sense, Jaime, given the context, the newness of that code too. Other board members?
I
Bobby's
agree.
thumbs up. Okay, it sounds like we have a consensus that we can adjourn this until we have a little more information from BFJ on the form-based code, as well as you can review the title and just make sure that we can have a more comprehensive conversation on this.
Mhm.
All right. Right. Thanks, Peter and JB. The next item up on the agenda is 40 Hamilton. So, Jaime, you want to?
Yeah. Give me a second here. So 40 Hamilton is, I took JB off. I'm going to have to come back here in a second. So 40 Hamilton is a existing 4-family house. They're proposing to add a 2-tier rear yard deck to the existing home. They need BAR approvals, which I think this board is pretty familiar with. They also need a site plan approval. There have been some questions about why does a deck need a site plan approval. The reason why is because it is a 4-family home. So it's not like a 1-family or 2-family home. Because it's a commercial property and it has a 2-tier deck, the building inspector determined that it needed site plan approval. So it's a little bit different. I know it's a little confusing. It's not something that you would normally see, but that's the reason why. The Kelder Sessions provided a memo. And so it's a type 2 action under secret, so it doesn't require anything in terms of consistency review under the LWRP. And, you know, it's just some minor comments from Kelder Sessions, just making sure that there are erosion and sediment controls in the immediate area of the construction. Other than that, there's no real major comments to deal with. So with that, I'll bring JB back in after kicking him off.
And I can share a screen.
Yeah.
Like JB, just like before, we can kind of limit any presentation to 5 minutes or less.
Even less than that.
That's great.
I think this is very straightforward. Like Jaime said, because of the use of the property, we require site plan approval, and because it's a 2-story deck, we will require the BAR. There is an existing enclosure that we are removing, and we're just creating a 2-story deck on the side of the house, so to have river views. And that's the side, and this will be the river side of the house. And the railing, he has this is the kind of railing that he has in the adjacent existing balcony, and this is what he wants to maintain. So we provided the 2 elevations. In actuality, the size of the deck is 13 by 18.7, and we are about 27 feet away from the property line. We have plenty area. There's no issue with setbacks. And this is the other deck that I'm saying that's already built, and it has similar type railing. If he wants to be able to match that.
So are you using a Trex decking on there, composite?
Yes.
What color?
Believe that.
Can't see it.
We did have the color here. It's
Okay.
like a grayish color to match the existing.
Yeah.
He wants to match the existing the rest of the house.
Are there any photos of the house?
Huh?
Are there any photos in the submission?
There were, yeah.
Yeah. They have. Give me a second, I can.
It dropped me into the middle of Sing Sing when I pull up Street View.
Yes, it is right adjacent to. If I do share a screen. I have a hard time sharing the photos.
So you haven't submitted the photos, so.
I think we did review the photo, or we reviewed the photos.
We reviewed them, but I don't have them on the agenda, so I don't know that you submitted them. I think you just showed them to us in the pre-app meeting.
Okay.
She didn't actually submit them. So your application is incomplete.
So,
I mean, the thing is, if we provide, can we approve this with, this is just a deck with the picture, we will provide pictures of the existing deck that will match that.
There's some missing context here, which is on those pictures, which essentially the brick underneath it, I think they needed to do something to clean up the sort of the style of the concrete blocks and stuff. We had a discussion directly about that in the pre-app meeting. So I think that you may want to, see the submission in a proper amount of time to be able to get this. Unfortunately, that's part of the visual element of this.
It's critical for us to see. I mean, even just looking at the drawings to see that context.
Yeah, I'd also want to see, want to know what the adjacent properties, if any, if there are any, what they look like. That would be helpful, but definitely want to see the property in question. Because I tried to look it up on Street View also, and I just couldn't.
I got it now, Michael. I got it on Street View. You just have to actually move the map down Hamilton. Icon.
Down the hill or up the hill?
Down the hill. So it'll pull you on State Street, and then you go down, you take Hamilton off of State. So get on State, then find Hamilton.
Yeah, I would note that it's a really big property.
It's a double lot too.
I think it's a triple lot.
Yeah.
For that area.
And the neighbor to the left is Sing Sing, and then you have another vacant lot essentially to the right of the house, and then another property.
It's not a vacant lot. It's like the parking lot for this, but it's the size of a vacant lot. It's a huge
Are there any properties behind it, between this property and the river, or is it?
Oh, it's all Sing Sing property behind it.
Yeah. Let me share my screen, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you.
That's amazing river views. So that deck makes a lot of sense. Putting it there, that's amazing river views.
Yeah. So where are we?
Yeah, the deck could be highly visible from the street.
Yeah. So Hamilton, so the building is I'm about to point with my finger here. Oh my God. So here's the building, and you can see this is the parking lot. All right. The property, it's back here on that far left corner that faces towards the parking lot of the Sing Sing prison. So it's visible from the Sing Sing prison parking lot. And it's not particularly close to this building, as you can see here. I mean, this is a massive lot, difference between here and here.
Can't even see the house now.
Oh, that's super helpful.
Yeah. So those elevations, those are the side and the rear elevations of the house.
Yes. The deck is mostly visible. I mean, it's only visible from, I guess, the prison and it's for the river view. So if you go down the street a couple more feet by the black car, you're gonna see that even from this point, it's hard to, that's where the deck will be.
So you're gonna remove that structure there to the left?
Yes.
Oh,
you should
no,
put it
okay.
back there.
Got it. Now you can visualize it. Perfect.
And where's the existing deck you said that you're matching?
Yes. So if we can move forward and we can provide the pictures of the existing deck, at least this can be done prior to the winter. That's what we're hoping to do.
Jaime, you noted a concern about the brick and block and how the deck was meeting that, which was.
Yeah, I really do need to see you need to see the existing pictures here. Like in order to understand the context, unfortunately, because I think you're gonna need to provide a condition that requires the finishing of some of that block to be consistent with the other parts. So the deck is a piece of.
If you submit in the picture, we can match the existing foundation. We just kind of an old brick finish.
But we can't, there's a question being posed to us as a board right now, and I'm not even sure I understand the question, so I would need that additional information to understand that.
It is an application requirement, so it's just.
Should have been in his application material, and it's not. And he presented it to us, so I know he has it, but he didn't submit it.
Probably an oversight, but. it's necessary for the board to understand the issue.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more time I want to spend discussing this if we're missing that piece. I think that, you know, it probably makes it probably makes sense, but we can't live with probably. Let's look at everything and make sure we do this properly. That's my opinion.
Agree.
I agree.
I agree as well.
Yep, and me too.
Okay. So I guess we'll ask the applicant to come back with the completed application, including the photographs, so we can finalize our review on.
Do you want to
Vote
open
both.
and adjourn a public hearing or wait until the next meeting or?
I'm happy to open a public hearing on this. Is there, should we have a motion to open the public hearing?
Bobby Bowker making a motion to open public hearing.
Anyone
Michael
second?
Aronson, second.
All right, any objections? No objections. We're in public hearing. The public hearing is open. Is there anybody here from the public to speak to this application?
Nope.
Nobody's here? Okay. Since nobody is making themselves present, can we have a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
Michael Aronson, motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Dinah Aaron, second.
Any objections? No objections. The motion passes. The public hearing is adjourned. Okay, and so we'll take a look at this next session with the additional information, and hopefully we can move this forward. Okay, so that does new business. We do have one additional business item. Jaime, if you could just introduce that to us, and so it's an unusual one.
Yeah, so we have an application here. This is 68 South Highland, Fetdom Realty Incorporated. So there's a current mixed-use building in the PO district. The applicant has taken a planning board determination regarding parking requirements in order to convert a single-family residence to a mixed-use building. It's already a mixed-use building. I think they're just trying to get into conformance. So the property currently has a business on the bottom floor that's operating, and it has an apartment on the top floor, which is operating. They have some parking on site. The problem is that the code, the way that the code is written, it doesn't have parking requirements for the residential uses, I believe. And so you need to make a determination about how much parking is required on this site, because that's the way the code is written. Essentially, where they don't exist, the parking requirements in the bulk use table, the planning board has to make a determination about it. Once you make that determination, it's going to go to the zoning board. So you don't have to do a formal referral to the zoning board. They're starting their application at the zoning board and ending their application at the zoning board. They're not actually going to need a site plan approval or anything else. They just need to get this determination about how much parking is required on the site. So they've submitted all their materials, applicants here. So with that, I can
yeah, bring them in.
I think actually, Jaime, that there are parking requirements just for the dwelling units in the PO district, but there's no other parking requirements stated for the PO. So it was just flipped.
Reversed, yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah. Okay. So the applicant, I'm just trying to, we have Edwin Elliott here. Hello, Mr. Elliott.
Mute. There we go. I found the unmute button. Okay, I'm here. Just as was corrected, that the use does say that we need two parking spaces for residential use, but it doesn't mention the commercial use. The commercial use, I looked at the two zones adjacent to this zone. One had a parking requirement of one car for every 300 square foot. The other one had one car for every 400 square foot. So we're looking somewhere in that range to come up with a number from you. One would require us to have, I believe, 6 spaces for the business use, the other one for 5 spaces. Yeah, that's what I have. So that we're looking for either requiring 7 spaces or 8 spaces.
Got it. So the two for the dwelling units plus the 6 if it's 300, one per 300, or 5 if it's one per 400.
Right.
Do we have can we do like a street view or just even just an aerial map, Jaime, just so we can kind of see where we're looking? And
yeah, so I'm gonna actually, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull up a zoning map here and show you kind of where this property is in proximity to other zoning districts. I think that might help here, in particular for this project, because my recommendation here is that you're gonna want to, geez, I'm looking at the wrong municipality here, so let me flip the correct one. It's getting real late and I just pulled up Yonkers, so that's not.
That's not gonna help.
Oh, Lord. Okay. So this property is on the corner of Broad Avenue, correct?
Right.
And South Highland. So let me just share my screen here. So this is the property right here in question. They have a little parking lot right here. You can see it's in the PO district. So the adjacent district is the T district, and there's BC district over here as well. So because of its proximity to the T district and it's sort of where it is over here, I think looking at the T district might be helpful because it's sort of sharing parking right now with the T district. It's not sharing parking on South Island, and it's less likely to go across the street, but even if it did, it would also be in the T district. It's sort of from locationally, it's close to the T district. So the parking requirement for the T district requirements.
It's C.
Is it C? I'm good. I'm getting tired, Joe. This is C.
There you go.
C3. There it is. Yeah, so the T district, it's the same problem. Sorry.
Okay.
This is not helping. So let's look at the BC district.
So let's not use those.
So for the BC district, office uses general is 1 space per 400 square feet of gross area.
Got mail.
What?
Got mail. I'm sorry.
Will this be used for office space?
Goodbye.
Yes, it is office. They have a little bit of storage in the basement for some spare parts for fixing oil burners. They have their records down there. The first floor is their main office. The private office for the owner of the company and his assistant is on the 2nd floor. And the 3rd floor is the residential use.
I mean, what other use? I mean, is like, for instance, medical professional, which is similar to office, is that permissible in the PO zone, which would be a 300?
So if they get a variance for the parking, I don't think that's necessarily going to open up the use for other uses. I'm trying to
No, I think that Seth's just trying to draw a connection between
Okay.
another type of use
So,
for.
yeah, so general, so I'm looking here in the NC2, NC1 district, right? The office use general is one space per 300 square feet. And the VC district, that's one space per 400 square. If for a medical professional, it's one space per 300 square feet, which is consistent.
Right.
That's in the VC district. If you go to medical uses in the NC1, NC2 district, it's one space per 200 square.
Right.
So they're about 100 off, depending on whether you consider this more like.
If the building were to switch to medical use, would not it be required to go back to the planning board for review?
It would need a conditional use permit, but it's still a permitted use.
But I'm saying as far as the parking requirement, it shouldn't matter for that use because we'd have to go to the planning board for getting that approval anyway. Then they could determine you need the different zoning variants for 200 square foot versus 300 or 400 at that time, not now.
With regard to parking, be the same, would they be having the same conversation we're having now with regard to that proposed use, I think is what you're
Right.
suggesting.
How many spaces are there? How much parking is available on site now, if any?
There is some parking on site. So let me just pull up the application. So they have probably 4 conforming spaces. They currently fit about 6 cars in that space, and they sometimes will. I think that in discussion with the applicant and the pre-app meeting, they said sometimes they'll fit even more.
There are occasions where everyone's there at the same office at the same time. They might have 2 more cars parked here. Somebody has to leave to get the other cars out. But this configuration allows them to park 6 cars and nobody has to come and move their car to get somebody out. It's not ideal, but it does work because the spaces on the 2 end spaces are wide enough to be able to maneuver into them around the other cars.
Yeah, keep in mind, the zoning board is going to have to make determinations on the variances of, parking space width, requirement length, whether they're conforming spaces as well. So the question that's in front of you is really about how many spaces do you think that they would be required to adhere to under the code?
And the code specifically says the necessary parking, you have to determine the necessary parking needed to prevent frequent parking on the street by persons visiting or connected with each such use.
I mean, the two parking densities, the 1 per 300 versus the 1 per 400. I mean, that's putting us already. I guess this is what would define what the variance would be, but we're looking at least 7 spots, which is already in excess of what looks like can be legally, physically Tetris into that site.
Yeah, so I think that the question that's in front of you is do you need 1 space per 400 square feet of office or 1 space per 300 square feet of office, which is generally consistent with other districts. The 1 space per 400 square feet is the VC district that it would be meeting consistency with. And the 1 space per 300 square feet is more consistent with like the NC1, NC2 district. And based off of the way that this works, to give you a, for instance, is this more like, Camp Woods Road, Croton Avenue, or is this more like, Main Street and Spring Street?
Yeah, in my mind, this is, I think it's kind of obviously the former. This is, far enough in between those denser areas that the 1 in 300, you're pretty much driving to get there. You're not walking down Highland to this space. And so to me, the 1 in 300 makes sense for where it is. Anybody else have any opinions or thoughts?
that would get you 6 required spaces for the office plus the 2 for the apartment, if you do the 1 and 3.
Yeah, the apartment is already set under the code, so we know that requirement.
Right, so we're just adding 6.
Yep.
That seems reasonable to me.
I agree. That seems reasonable as well to me.
Yep, under the code requirements of the other districts, that makes sense to me.
Agreed.
Well, you don't have to, according to the code language, there doesn't have to be a public hearing on this. So I think maybe you would just take a final vote, indicating what your final decision is.
Okay. It looks like there's a consensus that the 1 per 300 square foot, which would result in 8 parking spots for this site, makes sense. So, so is this a resolution that we need to pass, or is this just a vote?
Let me just see.
I think
So-
you need to pass something on to the zoning board with that detail, so a resolution would be best.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And can we have a motion to move, to make the recommendation to the zoning board with the 6 + 2, the eight spaces for this site?
Eric Talbot, I make the motion to make a recommendation to the zoning board of appeals for the 6 parking spaces plus 2 additional parking spaces for a total of 8 parking spaces.
Michael Aronson, second.
And roll call?
Seth Roy,
Aye.
Michael Aronson,
Aye.
Nina Aaron,
Aye.
Bobby Bowker,
Aye.
Eric Talbot,
Aye.
and Isabel Nguyen.
Aye.
Okay, 6-0 in favor.
Awesome. All right. It's 11 o'clock on the dot. So even though we spent 2 hours on 14 Water Street, I think we're still getting out of here a half hour faster than last time. So.
Oh my.
Oh, 45 minutes faster, I think.
45.
You didn't vote on the minutes.
Yeah. I
so-
was gonna say-
Oh, damn it. All right. So
Okay, good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
All right, so as everybody had a chance to review the minutes, I saw Joe's comments, which were helpful. All right, so do we have a motion to pass the minutes, to approve the minutes?
Michael
Last
Aronson
meeting.
motion to, sorry, to approve the minutes with Joe's comments as amended.
Bobby Backer, I second that motion.
Any objections? With no objections, the motion passes by unanimous consent. Now I think we're done, right? All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Have a good night, everyone.
Night.